Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee today. As this is a new process for everybody, so we welcome the pre-decision scrutiny and scrutiny's involvement within that and how we can further be part of that process and add to the work that's been taking place with the different panel leads. So item 1, introductions and membership of the committee. There's no apologies for absence, everybody's here. So if I could just invite each member of the panel to introduce themselves and the panel that they chair.
Hi, I'm Councillor Andrew Cooper and I'm the chair of the Environment and Climate Change Scrutiny Panel.
Hi, I'm Jo Lawson, chair of Adult Health and Social Care.
Morning, Serena Amin, chair of Growth and Regeneration.
Hi, it's Itrat Ali. I'm the chair of Children's Services Scrutiny Panel.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of December 2024. These are submitted for approval as a correct record. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll move them as correct.
I'll second them as correct.
Thank you. And can we show of hands? Thank you. It's approved. Item 3, interests. Any members of any interest to disclose? If they do, if they could complete the relevant form. Item 4, admission of the public. This is a meeting open to the public and is being webcast live. The recording will also be available to view after the meeting on the Council's website. All items will be considered in the public session. Item 5, deputations and petitions. There are no deputations or petitions that have been received. Item 6, public question time. No questions have been received. Item 7, budget for 25-26, pre-decision scrutiny. Can I invite the Leader of the Council, Councillor Patterson, and the Chief Executive to provide an introduction to the budget and the Council plan.
Thank you, Chair. Well, a new, yes, as you just said, a new way of doing things for yourselves, but also it's a new way of doing things for the Council as well. I mean, this year we are particularly keen to make sure that the corporate plan, the council plan and the annual budget process have run alongside each other, which is why you've got the two here today and why you've got a presentation from such an array of members and officers here. So we've had a short period of time to do it, and next year will be different, but we have made sure that the development of the council plan or the review of the council plan and the annual budget have gone hand in hand, and that we are looking at the strategy of what we want to achieve before we actually put the resources to it. And also this year, for a change, shall we say, the consultation that we've undertaken on the budget has gone on for a lot longer and has started earlier and with a lot more information as well. I mean, I did promise when I came, I took became the leader of the council, that we would have more transparency and more engagement in terms of the work or the decisions of the council, and that was part of that, to enable not just members of the council but also the public to have a better overview of what it is that we're proposing. And so the budget that we have here, or the draft budget that we have here today, is about giving the council some stability for the coming financial year, as well as supporting ambitions for Kirklees into the future. There's still a lot more work to do. We have been, I don't know if the word's blessed or not, but we have been fortunate enough to receive more money this year from the government in its settlement for the council, but it's still not enough. So we're still having to make some difficult decisions, but we are hoping that that will improve in the future and we can make all those decisions that we are making more sustainable. But we're here today, I say it's proposed. We are here to welcome the views of scrutiny, all four panels in that budget making process. Right at the beginning of the whole process, there were a few principles that were set out. So it wasn't just finance that we looked at. There were some things that we wanted to achieve by setting this budget. I mean, obviously, we do, by law, have to set a balanced budget, but we also wanted at the same time to maintain a prudent level of reserves. I mean, that's almost a given in both cases. We've always wanted, as a council, and certainly as a cabinet, to focus on prevention and intervention to not just prevent, as it says here, longer-term pressures, but to ensure that we are providing the services that really matter to people, that we do provide a service early enough for a resident or a household in order to prevent longer-term issues for themselves. We're also looking to the long term, and we recognise that we have to increase economic growth here in Kirklees, as well as regionally, as well as nationally. And we wanted to safeguard the regeneration that's been ongoing and that will need to continue in order to support that longer-term economic growth. We need to maximise our income from every single source. We don't necessarily, and we haven't, and we're not suggesting so at the moment, we don't want to put the onus entirely on the council taxpayers. We do need to look for income for our services, fee-paying services. We need to look for funding elsewhere, and we want to maximise what we can do, get from the government. We want, not want, but we need as well to prioritise transformation. Things have got to change. The world is changing, and we do want to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of our services in that new world. And then finally, obviously again, maintain appropriate risk and governance practices. We have to do everything by the book. So we've held the public consultation. It only closed on Wednesday, but I have got some figures which are sort of hot off the press, or some information which is hot off the press in terms of the number of people who have responded to that, and what the issues are that they considered important. I mean, there were 881 people who responded, and the council services which mattered most to them, it's not, I think, unexpected, but emptying bins and cleaning streets. I mean, as members, we hear that all the time, don't we? Highway maintenance and improvement, again, we hear that all the time. One of the things I'm particularly pleased to see there, though, is schools. I always feel that deserves more of a highlight. Schools and the work that they do needs to be highlighted. I think too many people, well, not too many people, but it's often taken for granted, the work that our schools do. And I think schools are changing. They will change, and I think that needs to be highlighted, and I'm pleased to see the public obviously see that as important as well. And then finally, of course, caring for adults and supporting children and families. I mean, that is something, supporting the vulnerable is what something we've always felt was dear to our hearts. So the proposals for having the most impact on people, from the things that were in the budget consultation. And again, I think it's no surprise to see that the replacement of household waste wheel bins from the larger 240-litre bins to 180-litre bins was not a popular choice. I have to say that is something that certainly the Cabinet will not be taking through into its final budget proposal, not just because it's unpopular, but because we actually recognise that, I mean, the point of that particular budget line was about ensuring we meet our waste reduction targets, our recycling targets for 2038. And we realise that that needs to be part of a far wider strategy, which needs careful thinking through and explanation and understanding. So that will be taken out of those budget proposals. And then the transfer the dementia long-stay residential homes, that was also something that people said that would have an impact on them personally. I'm afraid that is something that will be remaining in our budget proposals. And finally then, ideas for saving money, becoming more efficient by making changes to processes, managing resources better, absolutely, wouldn't disagree. And as you'll see later, one of the things I keep, my mantras at the moment, is getting the basics right. That doesn't necessarily mean cutting the grass more or filling potholes, but it means getting the processes right so that we are able to provide the best services that we can. And then reducing some spending on some projects in order to fund frontline services. Yes, well, I hope we don't spend money on unnecessary projects, but some of the ideas that people had in terms of that were getting rid of pool cars, events, and I'm quite surprised, flower pots. I thought flower pots were something that people felt really did cheer them up. So I was a bit surprised to see that one there. They are also asking, again, for better budget management and efficiency reviews and efficient management structures. Again, none of which I would disagree with. So just going to the council plan priorities, I've already mentioned getting the basics right. That is about the balanced budget, but also modern organisation, one that embraces technology, one that embraces good process management. It's all about making sure, and about our responsibility that we have for communicating with our residents. I mean, I think that keeps cropping up, how our residents perhaps are misunderstanding what it is that we're trying to tell them. So we need to get that right. Protecting the vulnerable, achieving inclusion, that's always has to be really almost right at the bottom, or right at the top, I should say, of everything that we do. It has to be. That's why we're here as in terms of local government. But beyond that, we don't just want to protect them and make sure they're safe and well. We do want them to thrive. We do want people to thrive. We do want communities to thrive. And I've often said that resilient people create resilient communities, and that's what we really need to see now and over the longer term. And then finally there, local economic growth. It has to be important. We need to work with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, with the national government, in terms of ensuring good economic growth, because without that we are not going to be able to produce the services and maintain the services that we want to do so for our residents. So that's my introduction. I'll hand over to the Chief Exec to see if he has anything he wants to add to that.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of comments, I guess. And I thank you very much for the committee for inviting us today. I know we kind of nuzzled into your agenda, so thanks for rearranging your meetings to fit us in. I think this is a new and exciting kind of way to make sure that the council gets an overarching view. It's probably, I just wanted to make sure that not only those people present, but those people that might watch us either today or later understand how that fits into the overall process. So today is a kind of pre-decision stuff. It's a pre-debate about the detail, and I'm going to try and avoid to do what my old chief exec used to do to me when I was a 151 officer and steal all my thunder. So Kevin and colleagues will be coming up with a bit more detail. So I'm not going to go into the detail or the mechanics or the high-level numbers of the budget, which colleagues will be doing, and trying to summarise a little bit of that. It also is different from the group process. So colleagues, myself and Kevin and some of the others, will be going round the groups and doing individual discussions with the political groups and trying to answer any relevant questions. And then at a point in time, and that is in the calendar, which I think Kevin will mention, the groups will come forward with alternative proposals or amendments to the proposal for the full council meeting in early March. We're not expecting this group to come forward with alternative proposals. It's not a scrutiny function to do alternative proposals. It's not. That's why we've listed the kind of guiding principles at 1.2 in your report to help with that. However, I think we recognise you can't just do that without asking some questions about the detail, hence why we're here today to try and do a little bit of that. I think we also recognise that time is short in those. You know, the government settlement doesn't come out until just before Christmas, which is a fantastic Christmas present for the teams. And the settlement was slightly better, although I'm sure Kevin will mention some of the stuff that's caught us on the hoof in terms of national insurance, etc. I think the consultation is quite important to help shape thoughts, but clearly it isn't a they say we do. It's a kind of helping to shape thoughts about what can save more money on stuff, what is the priority, I find the care homes one quite interesting because the number of respondents to say to that care home, was I personally affected by that? Well, there are 45 residents in those care homes, so it's been expanded a bit more to do we think it is, and we're still doing some detailed analysis of that. And if you, I'm hoping you filled in your little response on the budget, you'll know that there's quite a wordy bit that you can put comments in. Clearly, that's going to take a little bit more analysis of that. We're using a little bit of AI technology to pull out some of those comments, but we want to go through that in a bit more detail to make sure there's no key themes that were missed. And obviously that'll go on then into the Cabinet meeting in February and full council in March. A couple of other things that the leader mentioned that are quite important to us as well are also making sure we take advantage of other people's money. And I don't just mean the government in that, I mean the combined authority, I mean the health service. We do pretty well in our relationship with health for them paying for things that they are supposed to pay for, not always successfully at the level that we would like, but we also recognise other public sector bodies are really struggling in some of those scenarios. The timing isn't great for for health budgets because they always set their figures after us and always have a deficit that they start with the year with and then balance as they go through. So that's always a bit of a challenge, and some of us are heavily involved in those discussions with health colleagues. And also, I think just one other point I'll make, and then I'll open up for questions, or we'll open up for questions. I think the bit about being a modern council is challenging, because that doesn't happen overnight. And we can look down the road, or we can look at other parts of the country about what other councils do. Does that fit what Kirklees want as a priority? Just because they do it in another place or don't do things in another place, does that fit what we want to do? So there are some really solid questions. Back office services is often a quite useful one about ways that councils operate in other places. But again, it's taking that evidence back to Kirklees and saying, well, they do it something like here over way. And waste isn't a good example, isn't it? But do we want to do it in that way? Are those options available to us? How long will that transformation take for us to implement that transformation? What's the upfront cost to delivering that transformation, and how can we make that work? So we're working hard to do those things. Two quick things that I think we are working hard to deliver on, and I know you've had separate discussions about these in some of your groups. The customer expectation piece. We have got a big gap between what our customers think we should be delivering on and what we're able to deliver on, and we need to do more work on that to meet those expectations and spell out those expectations with our customers. And then the other one that I have been chipping on about for quite a while, or since I arrived, is about the council getting in the way of things. There are things that within our communities they can deliver on, and we have to be fleet of foot to make sure we can support and assist in those areas and not put too much bureaucracy in the way that stop that. There needs to be some level of governance in some areas on that, but again, we need to be fleet of foot to be able to. And that's not just a financial issue. That's, as the leader says, getting the basics right and working with our communities. So I'll stop there, Chair, and open up for questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I just thank the Leader of the Council and Chief Executive for providing that introduction to the budget and to the Council plan. And just to remind members, as just been said, this is a new process, a new way of doing things for everyone, and we welcome that. And just to remind members of the remit for the committee today is to take a strategic approach and focus on the suggested lines of inquiry as set out in the report. So are there any questions for the Leader or the Chief Executive? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. And thanks for the presentation. Much appreciated. A few things occurred, one of which was the principles. One thing that I know you've mentioned later on in terms of the priorities, but I do think it ought to be a principle, is resilience. And actually looking, because we're in difficult times, are we a resilient organisation to the chops and changes that are going to happen? So I'm sure you're looking at that in certain ways, but I just think it ought to be an explicit principle in how we approach budgets, that resilience is at the top there. If those principles are actually what guide us, so there was that. The difficult issues that came up, the ones that that came up, such as waste wheel bins, dementia care homes. I mean, one thing that occurs to me about both those items is that they didn't really come to scrutiny at an early stage, at the scrutiny panels at an early stage, to be able to discuss and go through those items in detail. They sort of come, oven ready almost to put forward. And those sort of issues, which are going to be difficult, you almost need to be looking at the policy formulation stage, I think. So different options and things can be explored. So that was one item. And I think, I don't think we're using pre-decision scrutiny enough, or actually early enough, to be quite honest. Fleet of foot and not getting in the way. Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. And, getting rid of all that bureaucracy and things. Now, my ward budget, a very small amount of money, £10,000 a year, which is significant for many people, but for a whole ward, you look at that and you look at all the processes that we've now put in place around that small amount of money. Now, I know we need things, and we need to make sure that those things are monitored correctly, but really, I think we could do better than that. One thing, and it's not my observation, so I'll credit Councillor John Lawson for it. Years by, we had a budget book, and where we looked at all the pressures, all the savings, and we go into detail about what was there. And you'd have each proposal, you'd have a good A4 double-sided page on all those things, giving some real understanding about what the impact of those savings and pressures are. And we don't have that, and you sort of look at that and think, well, how can the Cabinet really, and Carol Paterson's been around, Leader, Councillor Patterson, been around a long time, and I'm sure she'll remember seeing that. And that slipped off our agenda, and it doesn't help the governance of the council, and it doesn't help our decision making, and doesn't help us scrutinise, to be honest. So those are a few observations.
Yeah. Well, I'll go first and then hand over to Steve and possibly even somebody else. But there's a couple of things that I would like to comment on what you've just said. Resilience, absolutely. I mean, it's one of my favourite words. It's not in the principles because it wasn't that. I mean, that's retrospective, if you see what I mean. When those principles were decided upon at the very beginning of the budget process, that resilience wasn't there, but I'm quite happy to add that in. It's, as I say, it's one of my favourite words. I think it's really important. So next year, The difficult decisions. We have tried to involve scrutiny and in certainly some of the pre-decision scrutiny in some of the decisions that we've had to make. I'm not sure about the timing. I mean, I'm sure certainly the care homes you have seen, but it's a question of timing, isn't it? And so I might let Steve or even somebody else speak to that. Fleet of foot. Well, yes, of course. I'll let Steve say something about that, but absolutely. And then finally, just on the budget book. Yes, I remember the budget book. It was very incomprehensible. There are very, very few people. There were some, dare I say, nerds that would understand it all and enjoy reading every single line. I might have even included myself in that. But it was incomprehensible to most people. I don't think the information that we've all shared between groups this year has been much less than what was actually in that budget book. I think there has been a lot of information provided, certainly more than previously. I'm not even sure. Well, I'll let Steve answer that. But whether or not the budget book still actually exists in that form, I certainly haven't seen one. But it wasn't really helpful to many people, and in the past, I will say. But Steve.
So I'm kind of going to cover all four again, if that's okay. Yeah. Actually, I think resilience is in first principle. So although it doesn't say it, by setting a balanced budget and keeping an eye on your reserves, you are more resilient. So, well, that's what reserves are for, to help you deal with some of the difficult times. The more you have to raid reserves to, if you think about what's happened over the last couple of years, where you've gone back and raided 22 million into reserves, and then 15 million that we put in last year, that makes you less resilient. So the process of trying to keep a healthy level of reserves will make you more resilient in the long term, as well as we have been lobbying hard, and I think the looks like it's coming down the line, a longer term financial settlement from government. And I'm reliably told that we're looking at a 3-year settlement from December 2025, so for 26, 27, and the 2 years after that. So, and everybody's been asking for that. I think we've had 7 years of one-off figures under previous administration, so that's not helped. So I mean, I think we could add that word into that, but I think that's what we are aiming at by setting a balanced budget and being that. And also spending more time making sure that there's a longer term approach to managing where you need growth and managing where you're going to have to reduce spend. And whether that's savings or increase in income or whatever that may be. So yes, I recognise some of that, and we do a 5-year capital programme that outlines that kind of approach. So yeah, I think that's in the wording about how we do that. I think there's always going to be calls for more pre-decision scrutiny on some things. I think we recognise that. I think this council does pretty well on pre-decision scrutiny. I think there's always a case for could do more and could try do more, and I think we have to work hard on that. And I think as a team and as a kind of scrutiny and executive function together, we have to do more of that and spend a bit more time thinking about not only the next week's cabinet meeting or the week after's cabinet meeting, but what comes down the line 6 months. What are the big things? So when, I'd be keen to take some of that offline and have a joint work planning session at the beginning of the year with cabinet members and stuff and agree. There might, it is at the end of the day an executive decision about what they bring pre-scrutiny, but let's take that offline and try and do a little bit of collective work about the things that we're going to agree and possibly not agree on the way forward. I'm happy to take war budgets away and have a look at if the bureaucracy is getting in the way of things being spent. I think also we need to recognise there is some level of complexity in those arrangements. I think things are happening. I think some things happened. There are some, and Councillor Cooper, you know this because I've come and seen you on your patch. There are some places in the council, in the district, that aren't spending their money in ward budget. So, you know, and Councillor Taylor's quite pleased about that because he's raided it to help with the reserves position. But, you know, I think we could have a look at that, I'm hopefully. And the budget book we are taking away. I think Councillor, the leader is absolutely right. The previous version, which doesn't feel like it's been around for a while, was very ownership to produce. Kevin and I have taken that away as a comment from Councillor Lawson, and we are going to have a look at something that we can produce. I don't think it will be ready for this year's budget, so let me just be clear on expectations, but we will try and produce something that's got previous budget and at least one outturn figure in it so that people can understand it, but it's at a reasonable level to be able to do it. I've done that in previous places, and I know Kevin has as well. So we will take that away to try and produce a better, more understandable relationship. I just want to set expectations clear, however. It normally generates loads more questions. So we need to be careful on when that gets produced so that it's not too late, so that we haven't got time to answer the questions and then it's too late for you to do anything with it. So I think that's got to be understood at the timing of when that. And normally, after outturn in the summer, ready for September is probably the best time. And again, there will still be differences of opinions even when you do those kind of things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thanks for that. Just going straight to the budget book stuff. Anything you can do well and anything you can do badly, can't you? And I think a budget book with 3 or 4 paragraphs on impact and how that impact will be dealt with is a reasonable ask. I recognise that it may generate more questions, but actually that's a positive because it means that there'll be more depth gone into, and hopefully you'll get more consensual decisions around things. So I've gone through budget books, and yes, sometimes I've found them incomprehensible. Sometimes I've found them comprehensible, but that's all about how it's done. It's not about the principle of doing it. So I'm quite sort of keen on that. The resilience thing, yeah, I get, of course, that having reserves makes us more resilient in one way because it deals with issues and problems as and when they arise. But the other aspect of it, I would imagine, is actually being prepared and aware and doing the prevention approach that makes us more resilient as opposed to the crisis management aspect. So I don't think it's all necessarily about reserves. So if you're going to put resilience in as a principle, you would probably put some, what we mean by that and what its impact would be as well. The difficult decisions that come forward. It's part of the issue is that the nature of the governance we have, which does mean that we aren't really seeing things early enough to enable us to really do things about things or achieve consensus across the council before things actually are up there, up front as being issues, really. I could say a lot about ward budgets, but I recognise they're small budgets, and I really don't want to spend lots of time on it, to be honest. But there's a lot to be said. Yeah, using ward budgets to pay for grit bins and Christmas trees. No.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Perhaps if the ward budget is brought back to 20,000, we can talk further about it again, because there's more to talk about. Thank you. If there's no... Yes?
Just one thing, and I'm not going to respond in detail, but I'm going to ask colleagues to do that second principle about focusing on prevention and intervention is some of that makes you more resilient. The early intervention stuff, and we do a lot of that, and I'll leave that for colleagues to give examples as they come around their bits. Thanks.
Thank you. And just the point about pre-decision scrutiny, I think over the last 15 years that I've been here, I think we have done a great deal in improving that. And obviously there's more that can always be done, but I think we've come a long way from where we were. So I welcome that. If there's no further questions on that, we'll move on. Councillor Turner, Portfolio Holder for Finance Regeneration, and Kevin Mulvaney, Service Director for Finance, to give a presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just do a brief introduction and Kevin will pick up the technical stuff in the report. So as Steve said, this is very much a provisional budget because we got the settlement just before Christmas. And I have to thank the officers for working over Christmas when probably the rest of us were at home. They did a fantastic job to get that. We are still waiting for final figures, so again, that makes it even more provisional in some ways. So we're hopeful we'll get that in the not too distant future. It's good to see that the new Labour government has recognised the need to start to move to a fairer funding scheme. And I hope that this next year we get, as Steve pointed out, a 3-year settlement, which is what most local authorities have been pushing for. Most local authorities, through things like Sigoma, were happy with 1 year this year, because it was a new government and they wanted to give them a chance to get their feet on the table, if you like. But next year, we do hope that there'll be multi-year settlement. That does help us with longer-term financial planning and putting better structures and things in place. So hopefully, as I said, they'll take that on board next year. And they will develop a fairer funding scheme when they've had a bit more time. There wasn't a lot of time to do it this year. I welcome the changes. I don't think they go far enough. But I also recognise that there's still financial challenges within the country due to the current economic situation we find ourselves in. But that move towards a fairer funding scheme, recognising the deprivation, is work that I believe that must be continued next year. And it's time that wealthier authorities, there are a lot of wealthy authorities, get a better settlement than us, is recognised. Those with the lower levels of deprivation is changing funding for them, and more comes to us. We still, despite the slight increases, we are still underfunded compared to many local authorities of a similar size, with less deprivation, some with more money. So I am hoping that they've got 12 months now to develop a proper fair funding scheme for next year's financial settlement. And I know that's not without its challenges, because I know I was reading only yesterday, some local authorities think that the fair funding scheme that's been introduced isn't very fair to them because they've had some of their money taken away. So it's not without its challenges. So I think in the brief period they've had, they've done a reasonable, made a start, shall we say, but they must go further next year. They must recognise our levels of deprivation, the significant underfunding, and Kevin will probably give you the figures that we face. So hopefully, Kevin will now take you through the details, and then we'll pick up any questions after that.
Thanks, Councillor Turner. My presentation will go through the framework of how we've set the 25-26 budget, and then colleagues, portfolio leads and exec directors will talk about their own individual services. So the 25-26 budget, we estimate is going to be £389 million for next year. That figure may change slightly depending on how government actually funds some grants. They may roll up some grants into settlement funding, but that wouldn't change the overall spending power. The capital programme for the next 5 years for the General Fund and the HRA totals 1.4 billion. The HRA is obviously a ring-fenced account, and theirs is about 400 million. And the General Fund will be funded by a mixture of grants, government grants, combined authority grants and council borrowing. The housing revenue account, revenue budget, we estimate £110 million next year with income from tenants, service charges, etc. And that balances to nil with equal and opposite spending. So I'm primarily focusing here on the General Fund, and the budget is impacted significantly by rising demand and other inflationary pressures, particularly within adults and children's services. That is no different to any other top-tier authority. This budget proposes 11.4 million of new savings for 25-26, again, which colleagues will go through, and more than 90% of councils will need to make revenue budget savings next year, according to LGA's research. Councillor Turner has referenced additional grants as part of the provisional settlement. Yes, the settlement is better than we anticipated. However, we still think Kirklees loses probably around £20 million a year, and hopefully the 3-year fair funding review will begin to address that. When we publish the final budget proposals on the 3rd of February, that report will take into account feedback given by Kirklees residents and businesses, and also feedback from Scrutiny, and the final local government final settlement. We've been told that will come in the first week of February, so it may well be after the budget is actually published on the 3rd, and in which case we'd probably bring an addendum to that report. So the overall budget position for 25-26, some key headline figures there is how it's moved. So we start with a balanced position to open with. We estimate 22.2 million of additional funding, which I will come on to in detail next. A change in the use of reserves of 7.1 million. So this probably goes back to the comments from Councillor Cooper and the Chief Executive. We are reducing the reliance of reserves in the 25-26 budget. This year's budget, 24-25, uses around 13 million of reserves. Next year, we will use around £5.5 million of reserves. And in time, over the next, when we do the next iteration of the medium-term financial plan, we need to obviously remove that 7.1 million and probably actually start to contribute and replenish reserves. Budget pressures, net spend and pressures on spend and income, 42.7 million. Again, I'll put a bit more detail on the next slides. The savings proposals previously approved relate to the budget that was approved for 24-25, but that had 25-26 savings, and they total 16.2 million. And then there are 11.4 million of new savings. And that allowed, all those figures collectively allowed us to propose a balanced budget for consultation in December. So on to the funding, and this is the 22.2 million additional funding we expect in 25-26. You'll see from the table really in the bottom right-hand corner, by far the biggest contributor to that is council tax, which we estimate will generate nearly an extra £17 million. The budget proposes a 4.99% increase in council tax, and that's equivalent to £1.80 per week at a Band D property. There's additional government funding in the December report of 5.7, which was made up mainly of estimated recovery grants of 4.2 and a settlement funding uplift of 1.7, and there are a couple of minor reductions as well. So that's where we get the extra funding from. So how does that feed into proposed directorate budgets? I appreciate there's a lot of numbers on this table, and colleagues may not be able to see it wholly clearly, but I will point you to the columns that are headed demand, inflation and other pressures. If you add those three numbers up, 17 million, 19 million and 14.6, you broadly get to £50 million worth of pressures that this budget is proposing, particularly in adults and children's, as you see. And again, I would refer colleagues back to the point around resilience. The intention of the budget for 25-26, from my perspective, is to try and make the revenue budget as robust as possible. I can't guarantee there won't be variations in those budgets. Some of them are really volatile, but I would expect the scale and the volume of variations to reduce, because we are reflecting pressures that services are seeing on the ground this year, probably saw last year. But there is still some challenge for executive directors within those budgets as well. So it isn't just I need X million for this without the appropriate challenge. It would probably just be appropriate at this time to reference national insurance. Although when we did this report in December, we'd assumed the council's cost of national insurance from the Chancellor's budget would be net neutral. That was the soundings that were coming out at the time. We now think there will be a pressure on national insurance for the council. We haven't been given the individual council allocations, and those will come in the final settlement. But what we do know is the national pot that Treasury gave to MHCLG to distribute to councils was £515 million. The LGA estimates that the direct costs to councils will be £680 million. So we need to see the final figures to see what the impact will be on Kirklees, but undoubtedly there will be a pressure, and that will have to be met from any other gains that have come from the settlement. In terms of draft budget savings, again, I won't say too much about this. It's just to give you an indication of where the £11.4 million falls across the directorates there, the 4 directorates in Central at that point. And then onto reserves. This is the Council's general, sometimes called unallocated reserve. The end of last financial year, it stood at £25 million. When we reported the Q2 position to Cabinet in December, we were assuming a use of £3 million to help the in-year position, so that would take it down to 22 million. The budget proposals for next year are that we would add £1 million to that reserve, and then the year after add another £1.5 million to that reserve. In terms of how we calculate the need for the level of general reserve, we'll be updating a risk-based approach to calculating that reserve as part of the final budget report. There isn't a straight 5 or 10% of your net spend. There are a lot of risks within the council budget, and we take a view of various items within there to calculate the minimum balances. Onto capital plan. Total capital plan over the period, 1.4 billion, as I said earlier. Just over £1 billion on general fund, 382 million on HRA. The general fund capital plan is funded by a mix of grant contributions and borrowing. At the time of this budget report, we've budgeted for borrowing at 4.69% for any new borrowing and any refinancing of borrowing that we do in year. Latest PWLB rates as of yesterday were, the cheapest we could get was probably 4 to 5 years at 5.11%. So there is some risk with it within there, and longer term borrowing is at 5.7% at the minute. What we do within our treasury management strategy is we have a balanced approach to short-term, medium-term and long-term borrowing. So you don't expose yourself in any one given year with all your borrowing having to be refinanced. And we actively manage our treasury management on that basis. And we'll be taking the updated treasury management strategy to Corporate Governance and Audit Committee at the end of this month, where all that is explained in more detail. And I think that's probably my summary before the director's detail.
Just on the borrowing stuff, I think it's worth bearing in mind that the gilts issue that you'll have all seen on the news, and which is not just a UK issue, is an international issue. So our borrowing, the PWLB borrowing, is linked to that gilts issue. I know Kevin and I have been speaking to a number of people. There's quite a lot of, is this going to change? Is this not going to change? What has been built in because of the incoming new president in the US? There's a general view that the markets are trying to building as much risk now that they think, and will it all come out? Will it not? So I think we need to watch and see. Is that going to stabilise? Is that going to come down? Are all the problems that have been rumoured? What's the issue in the Middle East? Is that going to calm it all down, kind of stuff? So I think the markets are very, what do we say, prickly at the moment. volatile and have tried to build in some risk, and therefore the rate's gone up and therefore PWLB goes up. So we need to just be careful about some of that. And as Kevin says, I mean, he is Mr. Prudent. So he will carefully think about that going forward, and we'll see what happens, whether that calms down and the gilt rates come down and therefore PWLB comes down. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Councillor Turner, Kevin. Are there any questions or comments from committee members? Councillor Turner. Councillor Cooper.
So it's really about the our approach to this budget. This is very much in terms of the funding that the government's providing is very much an interim 1-year approach to things which are, you know, from 25-26 going forward. Fair funding times. We'll have multi-year settlements, and so there's lots of certainty that we're going to have, hopefully, from next year, and less certainty this year in terms of where we're at. So I'm just wondering really if how we've approached that as a council. You know, are we because you would imagine with that sort of approach, you'd think, well, we won't take any risky or difficult decisions at this time, and we'll look to the 3 years settlements, the fair funding times, to actually have a more stable approach to the kind of council's finances. That's, yeah, I'm not sure, but I just wonder if we're approaching this in the right way. I don't know if I articulated that very well, actually, to be quite honest. Maybe I haven't.
I think I'd probably call it a transitional year in some ways. So we're going to transition from, hopefully, if everything goes to current plan, that annual free-for-all about the transition, you know, the settlement, and everybody doesn't know until Christmas, and they're running around over Christmas trying to work the budgets out. So hopefully move away from that to that 3-year programme. I think we've been prudent this year, as somebody's already said. Kevin's prudent, I'm prudent, as you all know. So I think it's right to be that, not only because we do need to get the 3-year settlement, which will enable us to plan better longer term. I think the other reason we need to be a little bit more prudent is, as Steve touched on, and I'm going to develop a little bit, is the markets are very volatile. There's a number of issues worldwide that's affecting that, and we can't shy away from that. The German economy is tanking. They've got no stable government. France haven't got a stable government. Their economy is tanking. Austria is struggling. The South American countries are struggling, and we have an incoming president who seems hell-bent on world expansion and creating an empire. So I can understand that the markets are very volatile at the moment. So I think, given all that uncertainty, I think as steady as you go, producing a balanced budget that meets as far as we can within that budget, provides the services for our residents, is absolutely the right thing to do. And if things pan out in 2025 better than they look as they might, then perhaps we might be a bit more less risk averse to 25, 26. But I think it's the right thing to do this year. There's too much volatility out there, I think, to be taking huge gambles and risks. At the end of the day, and we have to recognise this is not my money, this is not your money, this is the public's money. So I think it's only right that we present a balanced budget that is as I say, I would describe it as steady as you go, and let's see what happens over the coming year. And hopefully, fingers crossed, the government sticks to its word, gives you a 3-year settlement, and introduces a proper, decent, fair funding scheme.
Thanks. And just to add to Councillor Turner's comments, just a couple of things. We'll bring a refreshed medium-term plan to Cabinet and Council in probably September of next year. So we will have a bit more information around the 3-year settlements. And of course, we need to recognise, I think as our external audit colleagues have recognised, the council does have relatively low level of reserves. So again, within that plan, we'll need to have a reserve strategy to start to build reserves back up that we will have used certainly in the past couple of years, and we'll probably use a little more this year as well. Thank you.
Chair, if that's okay. I think the other thing is, this isn't just about money for this government. I know I am involved and Graham is involved in other discussions. This is about reform. So what we are hearing is, and SEND is a good example, the country as a whole on high needs block is overspending by 5 billion, I think. This government have decided to put $1 billion into it and opened up a conversation about how can we reform SEND. We're right at the front of those discussions, and again, I won't steal thunder for other colleagues, but money isn't the only solution. So what else can you do as well as changing it? What else can you do, not just locally, but also regionally and nationally, to change the debates, to change the discussion? Adult social care, we've been lobbying for quite some time, haven't we, on adult social care reforms to be able to stabilise the market and to be able to have a better solution going forward. Children's social care, there's a debate ongoing. So I don't think, if I use that this is about chapter 1 of a good book, and I think we've made really good progress and got all of us interested on chapter 1, we have to keep going. We have to keep lobbying for both the reforming the formula funds, and I know you raised at a previous meeting, can we really rely on this money? Absolutely, we can rely on this money. Will it be called the recovery grant by the time we get to family fund? I suspect not. Will it be the volume of the money in for Kirklees? Absolutely. So I feel this is page 1 or chapter 1 of getting into it. We have to keep pushing back and going for more and more. And those parts of the country that are shying away from that and saying, oh, it needs to be, we need more in our county district area. Well, hang on, we've done it without, and you can see the impact of the savings, and I would say this, wouldn't I, because I'm in the Sagoma group. We can see the impact across all Sagoma authorities for the last 14 years that have really been a detriment to us. We need to start readdressing that, and that is coming down the line. I think it might be called something bit. I think there'll be a debate about where does that fall and how quickly. We know we're out of kilter by, 20 to 30 million that we should have had in our budget. We've got to start seeing that redress getting back into Kirklees coffers.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from the committee? No? Okay, so thank you, Councillor Turner and Kevin, for that presentation. So we are now going to move to the different directorates. So just go through. First of all, we'll have adults and health, then we'll have children and families, then place, and then corporates. So starting with adults and health, can I invite Councillor Addy and Michelle Cross, Executive Director, to provide an overview of the key pressures and savings for their directorate.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll lead in with an overview and then Michelle will fill in with some more detail. The key issues, well, there are significant pressures in adults arising from the Chancellor's budget, national living wage uplift and the changes to the national insurance together mean an additional 9.5 million pressures for adult social care. Additional social care funding from the government was very welcome. However, it's still not enough to mitigate demand pressures and pressures from the Chancellor's budget. We do require government investment to improve low wages of care staff. Continuous dialogue and review are essential to underpin our close working relationship with our partners. This is a valued relationship that remains key to meeting the evolving needs of adult social care in these challenging economic times. The Adults Directorate is working to deliver a significant amount of saving, which has already been agreed through previous budgets at 13.5 million for 25-26, which has meant there is reduced scope for new savings for 24-25 of 1.5 million of new draft savings proposed. Work is focusing on transformation and integration to model future demand and to identify and deliver social care efficiencies. I'll give it to Michelle now.
Thanks, Councillor Day. So I think others have sort of alluded to the fact that there are significant pressures in terms of demand across adults. And this is just a breakdown of where that demand actually shows itself. So you've got demand pressures, including inflation, of 8.4 million. And the implications of the council's budget, I think Kevin did go through that in quite a lot of detail, but this just shows you where the national living wage element and the national insurance element sits across adults. 6.9 across in terms of national living wage, and 2.6 for the national insurance element of that, and then just a 0.1 million across integrated and customer services function and assets. Next slide, please. So in terms of our draft proposals, there are 5, and you'll see the breakdown on that slide. The first one is the transfer of dementia long-stay residential care homes. We've had a long and lengthy sort of debates about this issue, but that will save the council £865,000. There are some other minor saving changes across budget lines, which means we've cleaned up some budget lines, and that will save £20,000. And maximising our availability of grant funding, and that's by ensuring that we prioritise support services appropriately to meet the grant funding outcomes, and that's 125,000. And then the Kirklees Better Outcomes Partnership will be saving 500,000, and that is following a substantial loss of income in 24-25, and the services had to reduce to fit in with the ongoing budget of 1.6. 0.5 was required to manage the reductions in that service, and these savings will now be released and effective in April 25-26. And in adults, the last one, we've done a lot of realignment of our staffing budgets across adults and social care to make sure that there is a true reflection of staff turnover, recruitment, staff progression. This actually doesn't impact on the current staffing levels, but that will realise 535,000 in these proposals. And then next slide, please. So I'll go through the capital schemes that sit across adults and health. So you've got communities and access services, libraries at 3.6, learning disability and mental health, day services for vulnerable adults at 7.2, Milldale and Crescentdale at 3.8. Now, these are redevelopment schemes that will support adults with learning disability. We are hoping to do a new development in North Kirklees because our current services operate in very old buildings. The buildings are of ill repair, so the reason for that is that's why we would like to spend that money supporting those individuals. And Milldale and Crescentdale, it's a redevelopment of existing provision, existing buildings, and that will go a long way in supporting the cohort in North Kirklees. We do have a new building in South Kirklees, and we're hoping that that will mirror the need and the expectation and the demand growth in North Kirklees. And then adult social care, we have 0.5 for the digital switchover. That is almost realised in terms of a scheme because analogue goes defunct in 25, this year I think, 25-26. And then we have replaced our care system from Care First to Mosaic, and that was 300,000. And the system actually is now in place. And I think that's it. Open for questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments from committee members? Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. In the actual report that went to Cabinet, there was a bit that was stating about adult services are based on the ability to actually pay. When it comes, obviously they're means tested, is the amount of income that somebody receives before they actually have to pay for anything, is there any kind of inflationary uplift? So say it was 12,000 this year before they had to pay for something, is there an inflationary uplift? And also, if they are paying for services, I believe there's across the board of 3% for any paid for services. Is that the same for adult health care?
Can I refer that to Kevin, because I'm not overly sure. Sorry. Fees and charges. Is that, sorry, Councillor Lawson, I'm just trying to clarify the question. Is it around fees and charges the yearly uplift, or is it around what people are assessed to pay? Because that varies from individual to individual, and that assessment is done for every single individual who receives support services. Excuse me, my voice is going. Can you just clarify what?
It was around if whether or not is there a person's ability to pay.
Yeah.
So is there then an inflationary uplift, say that they paid 12, that say the basic was say 12,000, if you had less than that income, you didn't pay anything, is with there. And then also in the actual cabinet report, it alludes to that there is the 3% across the board for other paid for services. Is that the same for adult health and social care?
Thank you.
So,
Kevin?
Yeah, Councillor Lawson, I'll pick up the point around the fees that an individual will pay. You rightly state they are assessed, and they're all assessed. What I'd have to check out is whether the allowable cap is going to be increased by government in 24-25. I don't think that was assumed in the care homes report, but no. I will. While we're here, I will check on to see if I can find anything about whether that allowable element will be uplifted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
So, with another hat on, my political hat on, I've raised the issue of the letter from the Care Providers Alliance about the impact of the national insurance, employers' national insurance uplift. It made some pretty difficult reading in terms of the impact that was expected on the private care sector. So in light of that, this is one of the areas where you look at resilience, you look at how resilient is the wider care sector than operating with the council, and so that's an area where I think you would look through a resilience lens at the decisions that we make. So in terms of transferring care homes, we're not just transferring the homes, we're transferring costs, I guess, as well. We not just guess, we are transferring costs over to the private sector, but also potentially to the families as well in terms of their costs. So looking at that, in a budget book, what I would expect to see is laid out those impacts and a really clear understanding of those impacts, because there is always the possibility that if things don't work out the way you hope, that those things will come back to you in terms of impacts elsewhere. And so that's I'm just wondering if you can provide some commentary on that and show how those risks and how the impact of those national insurance hikes are going to be convincingly addressed.
Yeah, so I mentioned in my intro our important relationship with the partners, and that includes the private care sector providers. And although the final figures aren't yet available, we will be working to raise the uplift to support the care providers as much as possible in an effort to mitigate for that increase in pay and in national insurance. I think Michelle can add some more on to the other issues.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Cooper? No.
No. and the reason it doesn't answer my question, which is I think fair to say, is fine. I mean, it will. The money that we've received, we will use as much as possible to deal with the impact.
Yeah.
What I'm not hearing is if that will do the job, if that will remove the risk, if some of the providers that we're going to be working with might go out of business, if some of them may cut back on their plans, if some of them will not recruit staff, if the staffing levels are not going to be the same, if care packages which were provided will become too expensive impact. So it's those sort of things where you'd want to see a lot more detail, really. As much as possible, no, don't really cut it, I'm afraid.
So if I just explain the process, then you might understand a bit more about the hesitancy to reply. So every year, and in most places that run adult social care functions, there is a debate and discussion and contract negotiation on a fee uplift for different types of service. So your general service, the one that was quoted in the call-in, and the 854, etc., and then different types of service above that. Every year, a council will want to go at a lower figure than providers want us to uplift by. So every year there is a contractual fee discussion, commercial, that myself have been involved in, portfolio involved in, and I know you're from children's and adults. So we are pushing hard to get as much as possible into that fee uplift to allow our providers to provide the services both at a demand and a cost that is reasonable to all. They will want a higher figure, we will want a lower figure. So when colleagues say we're pushing as hard as much as possible goes into that, that's what they're saying. And the high level numbers at the gross level are in that analysis that Michelle has provided. So we're not saying exactly that, yes, everybody will be happy. There will be some people that will want more. Have we taken on board the figure that we want to be able to think to get a decent negotiation? Yes. Are we higher than some of our others? Probably yes. Are others lower than us? Some are lower, some are higher. So it is a local discussion with your providers, and again goes back to the state of your market, the shaping, the discussions. So I think that the challenge why we might seem a little bit aloof is because we fought hard to supply data and evidence, both locally, regionally, and pushing back to government. We want as much in as possible. There is more money coming down in the social care grant. I think we're still waiting for the dust to settle about whether there are any additional responsibilities, because we saw a little bit of murmurings on a couple of grants that, and by the way, don't forget there's a bit of this, and we're like, oh, hang on. So we are pushing back to government to say, give us that more money. The national insurance deficit that Kevin talked about, which is on core council budgets, will also eat into a little bit of that. And the final calculations that we'll be doing that will go forward to the revised cabinet proposal in the middle of February, on 11th February I think it is, will have all that in it. So we'll build all that back into it in terms of those discussions. So I think we've done okay. I think we're about there. So I can't give you absolute reassurance that there won't be no changes and that some of our care providers won't struggle a little bit. But actually, I think we're going to do okay on the uplift that we're going to negotiate on. They would want more, we would want less. But it's in the right ballpark for us to be able to hear what they're saying about some of the pressures. We did squeeze it a bit last year as well. We squeezed it down a little bit last year, which didn't go down very well. But we got through it, and I think we'll do the same again this year. There's no absolutes in that game, unfortunately.
Sure, and yeah, the letter that came from the Care Providers Alliance, but the big key message was there's lots of volatility now. It was volatile before, but with the NI situation, that was that has given us a huge problem, and so yeah, my natural thought was, well, what's the impact in Kirklees? And what would have been great to see is something that came back which said, we understand this. This is how we understand it. This is how providers are going to be impacted. This is what the impact is on our plans. And so I think one of the concerns I have is that, with the proposal that we have on care homes, is that we're going from a degree of certainty, because we have a degree of control, to putting all our eggs in one basket and having more uncertainty because we're heading into a completely private sector approach. Well, to a large extent with dementia care, and so that's where I think we could have really done with a lot more information. that to really show that the decision is robust and that the impacts are not going to come back to us.
Thank you. Yeah.
You've got one small, very small, expensive air glass left in your basket. And so the current 2 homes that are left, expensive to run, cheaper to run in the private sector, you've got one small, expensive care home left in your basket. The majority are still out there. And in most other places up and down the country, they are still out there. I know views differ on this, and I know this is a political choice versus not, and let's not get involved in the scrutiny calling and all that kind of discussion, but that's where we are looking at in terms of the debate and discussion. And the commissioned market is as, you can commission the market to do those placements as much as you can do it in your own home. In fact, it's probably a bit more volatile in your own home because every minor thing you've got to throw money at. So I'm not sure I agree that by it being in the private sector market, it's more volatile than it is in your own. I think it's, and the other hat that Michelle has to wear is the statutory hat for the adult social care, that no matter what happens in there, we will provide a place for those people. And I'm talking about the other care homes that are already out there, not necessarily the 2 that are in debate.
Thank you. Councillor Addy.
Well, some of that is what I was going to raise, as in we will be looking at the care home sale again in Cabinet next month. So I don't want to go into that too much detail. But I was going to point out, when you talk about this safety net, these are 2 care homes, and we provide fees for care for 2,000 of our residents. So, if everything, if the disaster happens and, we all fall down a hole, there's 2,000 people we need to look after. So we are doing the best in shaping the market in a way that will take us to a certain future and have more resilience for the future of care for everybody.
So, I guess the point is that all those 2,000 people won't have the same care packages, and when you're looking at particularly some of the people in the care homes that we deal with, they'll have high needs, and those will be towards the higher end of those 2,000, I would imagine, and some people will be towards the lower end of those 2,000, I guess. And I guess they're also expensive for a reason. One of the things that you've actually mentioned is that it is about the issue of pay and addressing the issue of low pay in the private sector. That's been mentioned here, and so perhaps the costs that we're paying are actually the costs that we should be paying, and that the private sector should be paying, and that if we address those, then that's we'll get closer, if you like, to what we should be paying for care.
Thank you. Kevin, did you want to come back on?
I did, thank you, Chair. It's just in response to Councillor Lawson's ask. I've gone onto the government website and I can't see anything for 25/6, but if I look at the 24/5 position, it says on here that personal expenses allowance will rise with inflation. There's no mention of any changes to the capital limits, so the capital limits may stay the same at, is it 23,000, I think the upper limit around that figure. So that may well stay the same, but the personal allowance, we expect that would rise. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, we'll move on, and thank you for the presentation, the information. We'll move on to children. So can I invite Councillor Kendrick, the portfolio holder, and Tom Brailsford, the director, to go through the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I just reassure the committee that Children's Services is a very resilient service, far more than it was perhaps 10 years ago. And it's a delight to work with, and I'm proud to work with. They're constantly seeking to improve. A demonstration of that was at the parenting board this week, where the voice of young people was heard and responded to effectively. But the service really faces demand-led pressures all the time. The shortage of educational psychologists who are essential to the service, and the cost of locums is phenomenal in comparison. The service has no control over sudden increases in children becoming looked after, despite the early help, support and information which we invest in quite heavily. Cost and demand for external fostering and residential placements relates to our own lack of sufficiency and is extremely high cost. Work is continually taking place to bring young people back to Kirklees, as for the majority that is the right thing. There will be some it won't be right to bring back. Increased sufficiency in residential care. We've invested in Magdale House and are looking to purchase another as a satellite home to one of our residential care homes. And we're seeking, as was heard on Wednesday night, to increase foster carers across Kirklees and continuing the excellent work on special guardianship orders, of which we are the outliers in Yorkshire and Humber and the envy of all those councils who are constantly asking me about it. We're looking to reduce other costs in other areas of the service, but each relates to improved provision, doing the right thing. We reduce costs by changing functions, but doing the right thing for our children and young people. And I'll finish by just saying, special educational needs, we made substantial capital investment to address those issues. And I'll hand over to Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Thank you, Chair. So next slide, please. So just take you through, I think Councillor Kendrick's alluded to the majority of the demand pressures, but they relate mainly to external placement costs, to external fostering costs, and also to a number of packages of support for our children with additional needs. We've got other pressures as well, including adoption fees through the One Adoption West Yorkshire arrangements. Our continual investment in support for care leavers gives us some demand pressures, and also those children and young people with no recourse to public funds provide a pressure as well. So yeah, next slide, that's fine. Thank you. So we've got 9 budget proposals overall for this year. The first one's around multisystemic therapy. So if you remember last year in the budget, we'd put a reduction in there about multisystemic therapy, and we continue to reduce the resources in that area whilst we mainstream the approaches for social worker and family help workers, and then embed that practice in our new model. I've spoken to a number of colleagues across the region who are doing the same as us, because actually what that does is it gives us more resource in the wider workforce applying those approaches. We're also going to look at the resources that we put into family help. So you'll be aware through the new Children's Wellbeing and School Bill that there's a number of recommendations around integrating early support, with social care. But we've been ahead of the game. We did that. We started the implementation of that last year, and we think once we've implemented and integrated those services, there will be some cost savings there. People will be aware that we run something called the Local Authority Designated Officer Service, which we put quite a lot of resource in actually over the past 2 years. And we're looking at the resources that are deployed in there at the moment, because we do think there might be some efficiencies in there. We also hold the Kirklees, Calderdale and Careers provision, which there has been contract reductions for over a number of years actually. There was one last year and there's a further one this year. The reduction we're proposing is a lot less than it was last year, because we want to enable Calderdale and Kirklees to focus on our most vulnerable children and young people. We're also going to look at our commission services across the board and realise some efficiencies of around 150,000. Lastly on this slide, we're going to rationalise some of our early years functions. That doesn't mean we're not going to provide them. It means we're going to look at where there's some duplication and rationalise that across. The other thing that people will be aware of is we get some funding as part of the schools block called the Designated Schools Grant, and we're looking at what aspects of work that we can fund out of the Designated Schools Grant rather than the general fund. So on to the next slide, please. Yep, that's fine. So yeah, learning and early support, we're looking at rationalising our community hub coordinators. So we have some coordinators who have a function of supporting schools in their localities. They were put in place quite some time ago in austerity, actually, when the youth services had been reduced and schools had put this in place in partnership with us. We think there's an opportunity to redesign that approach because actually we have a lot of community connectors functions that sit in our community service, so we're looking to try and combine the two functions and make some savings there. We've also always had a specific team for compliments and complaints in children's services, and we'd like to take that approach to be a more corporate approach and integrate into the wider system, and we think we can make some savings there. And the next two savings really are about trying to reduce some of those demand pressures. So in the budget next year, we'd be budgeted for around 35 external residential placements. We're proposing that we bring that down to 33, which would save us £900,000. Gives you an indication of how expensive those external placements are. The other thing that we're really interested in doing that links to one of the budget proposals last year about our young persons activity team is, you know, children and families are feeding back to us. They want a lot more activities in their local communities and mainstream activities. And what we're trying to do is redesign a service that supports our children in their communities, in mainstream communities, to have appropriate activities to undertake. So at the moment, a lot of that is being provided by individual support and packages of care, which is right and proper for a lot of our children and young people. But actually, rather than paying a care agency to look after a child at home for, let's say, 6 hours, I think what we're finding is it'd be a better use of our resource, but also better for the children and young people if we did something in the community for those 6 hours. So we think we can look at redesigning that to realise some efficiencies. Okay, so that covers the budget proposals. And then in terms of the capital, I know we've touched on this already, but you'll be aware we're investing a significant amount of resource in 2 new special schools. One, the Woodley School, which will be at Almonbury, which we're investing 26.4 million in, and the new special school, the new SEMH school at Deaton for Joseph Norton at just over 20 million, which will really bolster our ability to educate our children and young people with additional needs locally and really reduce those external educational placements. We've also had about £7 million investment into high needs, and that's really about what we call our additionally resourced provisions, you know, those schools that are kind of within schools that help our children and young people that need a bit more support. Often there's capital investment that's needed to make the environment appropriate in there. We've been working with North Huddersfield Trust School for a while now to improve their facilities, but also their ability to take more students. And are investing 2.8 million in North Huddersfield. And then, as Councillor Kendrick alluded to, we're in the middle of purchasing another children's home to be a satellite provision. And actually talking about sustainability and resources, the home that we're thinking about purchasing was used by a private provider who's now pulled out of Kirklees. So we're trying to buy that provision because actually that's about sustainability and a good way of doing things. With the Children with Disability capital money, there was some money earmarked to look at our young persons activity team building, but actually because we're going to be taking that community model, what we've earmarked that for is improving things like children's centres and buildings in the community so that they're more accessible for our children and young people. So that concludes the children and families section. So happy to receive questions.
Thank you both for your presentation. Any questions, Councillor Amin?
Thank you for your presentation. I've got 2 questions. I appreciate these might be a bit too detailed, a level where I'm asking for maybe too much detail. So your reduction of provision to C&K careers, they currently offer a service which is above regional average. So I'm just wondering if there's any other support that would be offered to ensure that that could be maintained. And then we move to.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying that we've got an extremely good relationship with Calderdale and Kirklees Careers, and we really value the input that they give us for our children and young people. And it's quite and I'll get you more detail, but there's quite a technical answer that Calderdale and Kirklees Careers is actually something we call a TECL company. So there is part council oversight in their governance and ability. It also means that we have a flexibility with them to be able to flex our contract arrangements with them. So we're working very closely with them to make sure that they can draw in wider funding for some of the other activities that they undertake. So we were working closely with them about WICA and other aspects. So one of our commitments, me and Martin Green, the Chief Exec, have known each other for a long time, and one of my commitments to them is that we really want to support their sustainability and pulling in other external funding to maintain that offer.
Thank you. I probably should have started with I do sit on the board, so I am actually aware, but I just wanted to know if there was other support, but thank you for that. My other question is focusing on the service in communities, mainly the children wanting community activities, and I'm wondering if you could elaborate on how that would be better achieved.
Yeah, I think, as Councillor Kendricks alluded to, we've come a long way in children's services. We've just had our Ofsted inspection, which has said that we're good overall, which is absolutely fantastic. We've modernised loads of the things that we do. I think it's a bit unfortunate that I don't think we've modernised the way we work with children with additional needs who've got social care needs as much as other areas. So we have a fairly traditional model, particularly with something called YPAC, where if children and young people needed a break or wanted some activities, they'd actually be taken to a physical place, a building, rather than having those activities in their communities. If we're to achieve inclusion for our children and young people and families, we want them to be an integral part of their community. So, for example, I'd much rather see a staff member support a child with additional needs to access their local football club than be taken to a building to undertake an activity. So I think we've got to think more about having inclusive communities and activities. Notwithstanding, there are always children and young people who've got absolute needs and very complex needs. We want to make sure there's individual packages of support for those children and young people that meet their needs, and sometimes that is 24-hour nursing care, sometimes that needs to be in the home. And the other thing, to use a bit of an enabler and where we can get out of the way as a council, there's a lot of people who do stuff for our children and young people with additional needs. So the Stars and what's this? I always forget.
Little Deerwood.
There's Little Deerwood, but there's the youth club up the road, Stars, which do run sessions for children and young people with additional needs at very low cost and do a fantastic job. And all we had to do to enable that a few years ago was give them a capital grant to install a lift. So it's not anything, we're not wanting to take anything away from people, but we're just wanting to make sure there's a better experience across the board for our children and families.
Councillor Alley.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to echo everyone's thoughts and say thank you for the presentation. It's great to see how far children's services have come and, some of the work that's been done. And actually looking at where the cost savings are being implemented, it actually makes a lot of sense, and the proposals look really achievable as well. I just wanted to have a bit more clarity, because I don't think you mentioned it, and it's something we as a panel are looking at, is the changes to the post-16 transport costs, and what that implementation of those, what impact that's had in terms of budgetary, and if there was anything else that could be done.
Sorry, Chair, if it's okay, I'll answer that one. Post-16 transport comes up in the next next series of savings. So there's the homeschool transport, and we advise what savings and what pressures we've got there. It's okay.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead then, so I'll wait for that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from panel members? Can I just ask then on the LADO service that you mentioned that there was investment over the last number of years and now there's going to be efficiencies. Could you just outline where the investment was made and what the efficiencies would potentially be?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. But yeah, so I think traditionally, it's a very small service. So traditionally, we only had one local authority designated officer. When we were inspected in 2019, it was highlighted as an issue. So we've recruited another local authority designated officer from another authority. We also have an extra 0.5. I know that sounds a bit odd, but it's an independent reviewing officer who also takes on the role. And we also have someone who supports general training and support who's not a qualified worker. So we're just looking at that resource at the moment to think, actually, could it be better used in other areas or could we reduce some of that? But what I will say is I can reassure you that there's no way on earth we'll threaten our local authority designated officer statutory role, because it's an integral part of keeping our children and young people and employers safe.
No, thank you for that. I do recall that there used to be just one when I chaired the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel, so I was wondering what changes had been made. If I could just reflect slightly on Councillor Kendrick started by saying we're more resilient than we were 10 years ago. I think that was around the time when I chaired the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel, 2011 time for a number of years from that point. And I think we talk about the journey that's been made and the improvements that we made, and I don't think we do it enough to speak about the work and dedication that has taken place in order to make the improvements that we've seen and to be in the position that we're in now. And I think we need to appreciate where we were and where we are now, and the work, the time and effort that everybody in the services put in to get us to where we are. So I'd just like to congratulate you on that. Also, I think an important part of that was the borrowing to look after it was the learning in early years support. The investment in our most vulnerable young people, I think, is really important and should be highlighted as a big positive on there as well. Also, the reduction in residential out-of-area placements. I was mentioning this over 10 years ago about a need to try, because I think at that time there was a reluctance to speak about or to look at options that could have been available, and it was just there's a need and there's a reason, and that's why. But being more open and transparent, we've got to where we are, so I appreciate that as well. Okay, so thank you for the presentations. We'll move on to Place and Housing Revenue Account. So can I invite Councillor Turner, Councillor Crook also, and David Shepherd as the Executive Director to provide an overview of the key pressures and savings for this directorate.
Thank you, Chair. I think for many of our residents, this is the most important directorate as it deals with what you would call the... Have you finished? Right. As it deals with what we would call the nitty-gritty of council services, and the ones that virtually everybody uses. So as you'll see in the documents, do face some key pressures, but having said that, we have made some changes to the draft budget after listening to residents. The leader referenced this, such as removing the proposal on bins. We also listened to residents around charge to car parks, so remove some of those and change the way we operate the new charges. But obviously that has had an impact on income, and that obviously creates a pressure, so we have to find savings somewhere else to that. But as a proactive council, listening council, that, along with the bins, was absolutely the right thing to do. Obviously, the bin service changes that were proposed, again, will have to be found from somewhere else, but we've time to do that as we approach the final budget papers. However, it must be recognised that at some point we will need to make changes in how we deal with our waste, and in the next few years that will become more and more, we will receive more and more pressure from government. So we do have to look at all the options that will reduce waste and improve our recycling rates. We can't shy away from that at some point in the future. We will have to do that because there will be legislation as well, because the government recognises this is an issue. But at the moment we will be putting that proposal in there. As I say, we're a listening, proactive council. We also face pressures in our budget for maintaining our core assets, which many people would say we are blessed with, but that blessing of historic buildings, listed buildings, does come with high maintenance costs. But we will continue to review our assets and repurpose those that have any viability to do so and have a future, and also dispose of those that are not a part of our core offer that may have a value, and that, as I said, doesn't fit in with our core asset strategy. The capital plan I think is fairly self-explanatory, and it's been discussed many, many times over the last few years. And it's absolutely right. People may say times are hard. Why we continue to invest in these things? Well, that will help drive economic growth, creates jobs and a better opportunities for our residents. There are quite simply things that would not happen without the public sector doing it. So we will also continue to source all the external funding that's available and seek out any grants that become available over the coming year that will help support our capital plan. Without our partnership working with Homes England, One Estates, a lot of these things wouldn't happen. So we are very, very thankful to these bodies that help support our projects, the High Streets Fund, the Heritage Action Zone Fund. All these we've attracted significant amounts of money that's been invested into Kirklees, and I do thank for them, and hopefully that partnership working will continue to deliver fruit going forward. So Councillor Crook will do the HRO, and then David will fill the technical parts in. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, if it's okay, and Councillor Turner, yeah.
Yes, you did. So who's next? Thank you, David.
If that's okay, Chair, thank you. So I'll just give some comment on the key pressures and the general fund part of the place budget, and then I'll rattle through, and bear with me, Chair, because there are 23 savings in the general fund part. Then I'll pass to Councillor Crook, who will set out the bigger picture with regards to the HRA, and then I'll go through the further 12 savings for the HRA, if that's okay with members. So in terms of the key pressures in 25-26 for the Place Directorate and the General Fund, waste disposal and vehicle costs of £3.1 million. Within that, we have continued vehicle leasing costs of £750,000. Members will appreciate we are investing in our fleet, so we expect those to come down over time, but we still have those costs at the present time, so we have to factor those in. We also have the persistent organic pollutants, which is the additional cost of dealing with some of our waste, the larger pieces of waste, such as soft furnitures, which requires a lot more processing than it previously did, and that's £750,000. And also the chemicals cost has gone up for treatment of waste by £300,000. On top of that, we are in a 3-year extension with Suez for the contract that they operate at the materials recycling facility, and that's around £1.4 million of additional costs. So it just gives you an idea as to where those pressures are coming from. On the other hand, we have had good news, as Kevin said before, around the additional £6 million for the extended producer responsibility. But as Steve said, there are additional requirements of the council, and which we will have to look at in the year to come to ensure that we meet with all of the waste and recycling issues. Home to school transport, as has just been mentioned, we have pressures of £0.4 million there, and that's largely as a result of some of the pressures that we get from when we go out to tender for the routes, and then we get the costs back. We have to deliver the service, so we have to take the prices that are given to us, and that's pushed up a lot of the costs here. We are obviously working to address that, because we're investing in the fleet and making sure that we bring in our own vehicles, and we are able to then deliver the services without being at the whims of the market and what they wish to charge charge. But there are also increasing demands in home to school transport. There are more students that we are transporting, so we do incur increased costs. We are looking at, and I'll get into this, we are looking at ways to mitigate that, so personalised budgets where that works for people, but that's something that you can only do over time and ensure that you factor that in appropriately, hence why there are continuing pressures in that particular area. As Councillor Turner said, there is parking income pressure of £0.8 million, which is split between permits and the district car park income that we're not recovering because Cabinet chose to change that decision, hence why there is a reduced income there. Councillor Crook will get on to talk about the HRA in due course, but we do have significant pressures around damp, mould and condensation. The issue that I would say there is, whilst we are cognisant of budgets, we must make sure that we deliver the repairs that are necessary, that tenants can be safe within their homes, hence why we have an increasing repair bill around damp, mould and condensation, because we have a policy that deals with the root cause and has a root cause analysis to deal with the repairs that are necessary. And that will be the case until we get through the bulk of the damp, mould and condensation cases. Similarly, with disrepair, we have a legacy there of claims that are coming through, and we are investing in our legal services to make sure that we have a more efficient approach to dealing with disrepair, but also the services are working to ensure that cases don't come into housing disrepair, but we do have a £1.5 million pressure there. If I can move on to the next slide, please. I am going to rattle through these, if that's okay, Chair, but please do stop me if you think I'm going too fast with them, but there are quite a few of them. In terms of, also my voice is probably at some point going to give in, so if I stop for a drink, then you'll know why. In terms of the first saving proposal there, reduction in cleaning services in our buildings, but that does exclude care homes. That's a 50% reduction. At the present time, we clean twice a day within our council buildings. We are going to move to cleaning once a day. There are staff implications. Myself and Rachel Spencer-Henshaw are working through those with the staff teams to ensure that we manage that appropriately, but that saves £587,000 in terms of a full year effect. We are also looking to reduce the grounds maintenance for council buildings and facilities. Again, that's something that always gets comment, but we are looking at reducing the specification, still maintaining a standard within and around council buildings, but we know we can save £125,000 by doing so. We are well on working with the community group with regards to the Hadawi Centre and the community asset transfer. We expect that to happen within year, and a full year effect of that will be £75,000 saving. In terms of housing growth, we are maximising funding. You will see this on a number of these savings, maximising funding from West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So when it is appropriate for us to charge from schemes that are in development, we will do that, and we will recover additional staff costs on top of what West Yorkshire Combined Authority pays us to deliver a housing growth function in the first instance, and that's a legitimate charge to put there. Similarly, the next one, we are deleting posts that have been vacant in Housing Solutions. This is the homelessness, private sector enforcement teams and the allocations teams. We're deleting posts that have been vacant for a long time there. We will do reorganisation. We will ensure that we have a robust arrangement in place so that we are able to meet with all of those needs that present themselves and continue to do so. But we think we can be more efficient and save the £80,000 there in the coming year and future years. We will take opportunity to work with partners such as Network Rail, and we will charge them where they're using our facilities. So where we're leasing land at Flint Street to Network Rail, they're paying us for that, and we get a clean rental income for that. So that's what you see there in terms of £150,000 per year. It's a sensible thing to do, and it retains the site for future use as well, once Network Rail have finished the upgrades to the Transpennine upgrade. We are deleting posts in asset strategy that have been vacant for some time. We have a big job to do in terms of our corporate landlord function. We're absolutely aware of that. But again, where we can take efficiencies, we will do without impacting on the overall delivery, but also recognising that we do need to change the way that we do things. We listen to members in terms of the feedback that they give us and how we can be better in terms of some of our corporate landlord functions. In terms of capitalising of building enhancement costs, again, this is just it's an accountancy treatment, but an appropriate one to ensure that we are capitalising costs for bundling up smaller jobs that in the past have just been charged to revenue. It's appropriate to charge it to capital, and it's a sensible financial arrangement, and it saves us £50,000 within a year. The next one, Councillor Kendrick talked about this at full council just this week for Knoll House. And Councillor Kendrick confirmed, and I'll reconfirm, that yes, we can deliver a saving by mothballing that building, but we will only do that when it's at an appropriate point for the service in order to do so. So we're working very closely with Children's Services and ensuring that there's continuity of service delivery. And I think it's really, really important that we stipulate that. So if that means that we don't get a full year effect from that particular saving, then we won't get a full year effect from that particular saving, and we'll look to address that elsewhere. Okay, so the next slide, if that's okay. On to the environmental strategy and climate change savings. So just for here, we have the first one, which is school transport transformation, which I've already mentioned. But just to reiterate, that is about rerouting, making sure we have the efficient routes in place, making sure that we are working with parents and children in order to be able to deliver more personalised budget arrangements in line with the policy that has already been agreed, and we believe that we can save for £156,000, accepting that this is an area of pressure at the same time. So we have to balance that in terms of meeting the appropriate pressures and working with Kevin so that he can allocate appropriate budgets into the service, but delivering appropriate efficiencies at the same time. Just accepting the status quo is probably not good for the service users. In terms of the next saving there, that's a change to the nighttime noise service. We will still deliver a nighttime noise service. It won't be staffed by the students as it has been in previous years during the summer, which presents a further £70,000 cost to us. We'll be using technology. People have got the ability to download apps onto their phones, record, provide evidence. Where necessary, we will still have the out of hours service, and where necessary, there will be officers that will be attending to that service, but we believe by stepping into the modern age we will be able to save £70,000 in terms of the cost of that, delivering that service, whilst not impacting on the actual service delivery that residents are able to receive. And the next one is a fairly innovative one. This is an electric vehicle salary sacrifice scheme. I say innovative, it is for Kirklees Council. This is us bringing in a scheme that's worked elsewhere in a number of places and taking advantage of a reduction in the national insurance contribution. So it's going the other way to the previous comments around national insurance. We get a benefit here for people entering into the leasing scheme, and that reduces our national insurance contribution. We think that will give us a net saving of just short of £90,000 per year on a very, very conservative estimate, and we have factored in there the costs of the administration of that, an additional post in HR in order to administer aspects of that scheme. The final one on that particular page is a review of council-wide support services. This is the business support functions that support all of the directorates. Again, I'm working with Rachel Spencer-Henschel to address exactly how we're going to deliver that. The reality is that different councils do different things here. Some have everybody all sat within one team. We've got an example of that within the Place Directorate. Other councils put people into business support functions into the teams that they're within. We think we can generate some efficiencies by doing that and reduce some of the management that we have to put in place at the present time. But we are really clear. We've listened to members around not wanting to reduce the service that's delivered to elected members in terms of council inquiries in particular. So we are moving forward, but we do feel that we can save a significant amount, £400,000 within a year on that particular saving. If I move on to the next page, and just bear with me while I have a quick drink. On to highways. So network management, income and efficiencies. We are at the early stages. This is one you'll see that this has been pushed into the year 26-27, but it's worth mentioning it because we will need to do some of the preliminary work within this year. We think we can get more income from people who are using our highways for works purposes. So obviously we have a permit arrangement at the present time. We need to review that and review the charging arrangements. We think that there is a win-win here for residents in Kirklees because this incentivises people to get their works done quickly and get off our highway and prevent traffic jams building up, which many of you will have experienced this week coming in via Berry Brow, if you've seen the temporary works that have been put in place there, which weren't the council's works, they're necessary works for other utilities providers, but it does disrupt people, and we think that there is more income that we can justifiably recover on that particular one. In terms of the next one, which is a trade waste charge review, all we are doing here is stepping in line with the charges of commercial providers. In effect, we've been charging far less than commercial providers for trade waste previously, so we think we can deliver a £95,000 saving by stepping in line with other commercial providers who deliver services within Kirklees and maintain the standard of service that the council already delivers on trade waste. Next, we have the review of staffing capital recharge rates to reflect the annual pay award and overheads. So again, it's a capitalisation arrangement and making sure that we're doing that consistently across schemes within street scene and the highways area. It is an area where we are getting additional money coming through from government. There was an announcement a couple of weeks ago to say that there was further highways capital monies available for councils. So we factor that in as to what that means in terms of the money that we can cover off our staffing costs that otherwise would be a burden to the general fund. Next on here we have the borough-wide replacement of household waste wheel bins. The leader has already talked about this and advised that that's been withdrawn, so I shan't say any more on that particular one. Next we have the efficiencies related to council service cars and bookable pool cars. We still want to deliver a service, but Steve's been quite clear that there are more efficient ways of delivering a pool car service rather than just delivering the fleet that we have at the present time. And we can look at a number of different options, whether that's us having the fleet or whether that's others being able to utilise some of their capacity in terms of fleet. And we do believe that there is a saving there of £100,000 within year. Nearly there, Chair. I'm on to the final slide of this particular section, if that's okay. So on to skills and regeneration now. At the top of the slide, the review of management across the service. We're taking advantage of people who have vacated, who've been very helpful to the councils, particularly senior managers, but we've held those vacancies and we feel we can restructure now. We're confident that we can do that and not have to fund from the council's general fund. The other thing that I would say, and I'd add to the comments that Tom gave about working with West Yorkshire Combined Authority, we do believe that there will be additional money coming down the track from government because this is a key area of devolution where additional monies will be coming through to West Yorkshire Combined Authority and passported through to local government. So we don't anticipate, actually, with taking a reduction in this area, that it's going to reduce the service level that we and our partners are able to deliver in Kirklees. If anything, we would look to try to get some of that funding back in to pay for some of the higher level posts and deliver new programmes with West Yorkshire Combined Authority funding in due course. In terms of employment and skills reserves, we have taken a one-off dip into those reserves to fund some legitimate core costs of the team moving forward. And again, we will work carefully with the changes to gain share funding and particularly the success to the UK shared prosperity funding to ensure that we have an exit strategy that works and ensures that we don't impact on the service provision longer term, but we make use of the reserves that are there for that particular purpose. The next one is a reduction in business and economic activity and the support that we provide to the businesses through reduction of match funding for external programmes. Again, this is an area that we've had to do a lot more than the £50,000 here in recent years to say to funding partners that the council simply is not in a position to provide the match funding that it has done in previous years, but we are very much up for working with them and delivering with them, providing they can recognise that we don't have the wherewithal to provide match funding in the same way as we have previously. And with partners like particularly West Yorkshire Combined Authority, those conversations have gone very, very well indeed, because they recognise that local authorities need some assistance, particularly in areas like this, moving forwards. Major projects income is the next on here, £80,000 efficiency. We've got a lot of capital projects going on. We've got one in Holmfirth at the present time. So we're able to charge accordingly, and we will have further capital projects coming forward in the year. So there will be further improvements. Some will experience disruption at Lockroyd Junction in the year coming up as well, and we'll be able to charge to that. And the final one on here is housing growth, utilisation of neighbourhood capital grant funding, again paying for staff, this time in Dewsbury, for the work that we're doing at Daisy Hill. So I'm going to take a breath, Chair, if that's okay. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm not, because I do have a further slide. I do apologise. I thought I would. I got to the end of it then. This is just to say the capital borrowing schemes. Dewsbury Riverside, the council has pledged to put £6 million in. Members may or may not be aware we're about to submit to Homes England for a grant of over £50 million for Dewsbury Riverside to help us put the infrastructure in place to open up the housing opportunity there. This is the council's contribution within that area. This is the council's, by far the council's largest site for new housing growth of upwards of 4,000 homes that's been expertly planned with Homes England and with the other landholding parties at Dewsbury Riverside. We also have the corporate landlord programme of £47.7 million within that asset investment, landlord compliance and landlord welfare programme, as well as the property database. All need investment as set out on this slide. And also within the capital borrowing going forward in the next period, members will be aware, because it's been to Cabinet, George Hotel, the financial requirement has been reset at £30 million. That impacts on our cultural heart, which then brings that down from £262 million to just below £240 million, because there's an additional requirement there to fund the fit out for the museum and gallery, which is the phase 2, which is a report that you will have seen has come into Cabinet next week as well. We also have money in the capital programme moving forward for the unclassified roads of £3.3 million and the waste management plan to ensure that our infrastructure is continues to be up to date of £8.6 million, because we have 2 waste transfer stations and obviously we have household waste recycling facilities, and we need to make sure that they are of an appropriate standard for the years to come. And finally, we are making a large investment over the next period in our vehicle replacement programme, and we have just set up a green fleet board to ensure that programme moves forward, not just to replace like for like, but looks at how the council can contribute to its carbon reduction commitment in due course as well. I have finished now, Chair.
Thank you very much for the detail and effort and stamina to get through all of those. I was looking at the number of slides at the bottom and I thought, yeah. Questions, discussions, Councillor Cooper.
So thanks for that, and a couple of thoughts. One of which is that the government's expressed its desire to do a lot more on green energy, and we've got Great British Energy, I think it's called, that's going to be coming forward, and some opportunities that are going to be there to hopefully realise funding which will enable us to do work. So I'd be interested in some commentary really about the capacity that we'll have to be able to take on some of those projects to deal with climate change, and to make Kirklees again a authority which is leading the way on climate change. So the other thing that I'm interested in is the cultural heart, really. And I know there's been some reprofiling of that, and some cost reductions that have come. One area, I think it's phase 5, is it, the venue aspect? One thing I've brought up in the past, which is about the venue, and we do have some cultural venues very close to the cultural heart. This one, the town hall, and we also have the theatre, Lawrence Batley Theatre. And so the question that I've asked in the past has been about how the new venue is going to relate to existing buildings in terms of the people who come here and have performances, the people who are going to go there, and the Lawrence Batley Theatre, and so and basically, are we fishing in the same pond? And is this town hall and is Lawrence Batley going to lose income? Now, what I've been told in the past in response to that is, no, we're going for different markets. It's all going to be different and everything. And so that's been the response I've received. What I don't feel I've seen, and if it exists, I apologise, is something which demonstrates that how this is adding something different that doesn't currently exist, and does that in a sort of really robust way. And so basically, if some comedian would come here to do a performance, why they wouldn't go there instead? So where is Jimmy Carr going to go is the big question, isn't it? We'll see. But so that just, if you could provide a bit of something on that, so I can that'd be interesting.
I'll come in first, and no doubt David will come in afterwards. We're not fishing the same pond. The Lawrence Batley capacity is about 400. The town hall, whilst it has
Not even that.
Not even that. The town hall is not suitable for certain events. Funnily enough, I was here last Friday evening at an event, but it's not suitable for certain level events. So there is capacity without out there in the market for a venue that allows those type of events where, shall we say, people don't want to sit down and watch people. They want to perhaps do a bit of dancing, or in my case, stand watching, because I'm too old now. So there is a market for that. Oh, I am. So there is a market for that. We can attract that sort of people. And also, it's envisaged this is not going to be simply like, say, the O2 in Leeds, which is a venue that's used of an evening for either gigs or DJs to turn up. This is a space that we envision to be able to use during the day. So we hope to, because it'll be state of the art. There's no reason why we can't attract conferences there. There's no reason why people can't use it for events. We're hoping that space will be created for people to be in there doing stuff during the day. So it's not just rock up at 6 o'clock and open it. We envisage this will be open more during the day as well as the evenings. There's a multi-use space. And because it can be divided off, you can have different events on. So it's about more than just having a venue for an evening. We want to use it during the day and attract different audiences to that. And as I say, we can't put certain events on here because the famous incident where the plaster fell off into the chief exec's office stopped all that sort of thing. And we spent when I was a culture portfolio, we spent a lot of time and money looking at the possibility, and it's just not feasible to do that sort of event. It has to be those more sit-down types of events. So we only track a narrow band of the musicians, if you like, that's out there touring, because they can't come here. So hopefully they'll go down there. And the size of it is more viable because you have to have a bit of a size. The parish is very good. I go to the parish quite a bit, but it's only small. It can only attract, again, it can only attract people that sell enough tickets to make a living out of in there, if you like. You're not going to get a big band that's got 3 roadies and 2 guitar techs with them to go to the parish because they won't make any money. So we'll attract that sort of different audience. So yes, and I think I'm fairly sure, and it's a long time since I've read it, but I'm fairly sure that there's those details in the business plan. But seeing as it went to 1,000 pages, I can't remember exactly, but I'm sure it's in there.
Chair, if I could just add that Councillor Cooper asked, I'll add to that one, but the Councillor Cooper asked a question firstly about the climate change resource. So to give you assurance, you're probably aware, Councillor Cooper, there have been 3 members of staff that have left recently because they've achieved bigger and better things. They're going on to other roles elsewhere, and good luck to them in that, and they will stay close to Kirklees Council. They were critical in terms of delivering our climate function. I recognise that we need that capacity, so we are recruiting to those posts. So we will backfill those posts. We recognise that it's an area where there is funding coming in. So you've mentioned some areas, but I would also add to that the district heat network, the local, the low emission vehicle schemes, the Levi schemes, and others which we will be able to charge effectively and ensure that we recover monies in future. And we know that, as you say, there is a lot of appetite from government and partner agencies to bring forward energy schemes as well. So we need to be in a position to ensure that residents and businesses in Kirklees capitalise and benefit from that, and having the core resource in place will be important to do so. In terms of the only thing I would add to what Councillor Turner says about our cultural heart is that yes, indeed, the strategic outline business case, which was in the first cabinet report that I brought to cabinet in 2021, set out in detail, and Councillor Turner's right, there was a 2,000-page appendices to that, but it set out in detail the 5-case business case and set out why the venue that's proposed complements the activity here that's already here within Huddersfield and actually starts to generate further footfall at night time. We're starting to see that from some of the interest that I've had, which I can't disclose, but we've had interest from hotel groups who want to come in as well to add to what the council are doing in terms of activity within Huddersfield. So we are starting to see the type of interest from the investment proposal that the council is bringing forward that we expected in the first instance. But we aren't resting on our laurels. You will see from the report that's coming to Cabinet next week that there is a proposal to review Phase 5, and quite rightly so, because as you can see from the figures here, it doesn't add up at the present time, and we need to make sure that there are efficiencies in place in order to deliver the master plan as it's set out, or indeed to review that. So that's what we're doing at the present time, and looking how can we deliver that and deliver the offer that we need for Phase 5, but within the funding envelope that Kevin's been able to put in the medium-term financial plan and the capital programme moving forwards. Okay.
Can I just add one thing to that? Is we as it's rightly pointed out, the George is now 30 million, but at the moment in time we are looking at alternative providers. So if we can achieve grants for that money can then go back into that pot. And we're talking to various organisations around whether there's some money they can chip into to get the George over the line. But that money that could then go back into the cultural heart plan. So hopefully that those talks may bear fruit. Who knows?
Just quickly, so the changes that you're looking at in terms of the cultural heart, will those realise savings that we've not yet budgeted for in this budget?
In the first instance, what they are doing is demonstrating, is there still a need for the proposals as they're set out in phase 5, because the landscape is changing. You've all seen the news around venues, particularly one close by that is just opening and has had a troubled start in terms of its opening, but more as a result of the operator not fulfilling their obligations rather than the actual venue itself. But there are other venues around the region that are incredibly successful and have overperformed in terms of their success. You only have to go and have a look at Leeds Arena and see how that's been faring over the years in terms of attracting and ensuring it contributes to the Leeds wider economy. So that's the first thing that we are looking to do in terms of the review. But indeed, what we will do is say, are there more efficient ways of delivering the package of arrangements that are on phase 5? Because bear in mind, there's a car park with a venue sat on top of it. So we want to have a look at that and have a look at whether there are construction efficiencies that can be achieved, whether there are different permutations and combinations as to what we're doing across a range of activity within Huddersfield Town Centre. And it's right and proper that we do that throughout this programme. The Council chose to do this in a phased way, and that's given the Council the opportunity to review as it goes along. And I'd always brought this forward in a way that Cabinet have the opportunity to make a decision at each phase through the gateway process to ensure that each key decision is Cabinet's and they're not bound to follow through with future decisions. It's made very clear as to what they're being asked to decide at each stage. So that's the focus of the review.
Thank you. Can I just ask a quick question around work with partners when you're looking at that one, particularly around a venue with, for example, the university or the football club or the rugby, who are understanding to be moving from their current location?
Yes, I work with all of those partners on a regular basis. The university are very, very keen for our cultural heart to be delivered in its entirety, because one of the things that they aren't able to offer is a confident benefit for their student body of 21,000 students for a town offer that you would expect for a student town. A lot of the students, as you'll probably appreciate, Councillor Burke, stay on campus and don't necessarily partake in a lot of the opportunities available to them. We want to make sure that they do come over, hence why the offer has been designed in a way that attracts to a very wide demographic, including younger people, hence why things like the venue will be particularly attractive to them. I work very carefully and closely with the football club and with the rugby club as well around their aspirations, and again they are both complementary around the council's investment into the town centre. The football club themselves have taken the front foot on this one in terms of improving some of the routeways into the stadium. You'll have seen that whilst you go, if you've been in and around the stadium environments. That's all work that the football club have done at their cost, but they've been quite clear that they're impressed with the work that the council are doing around investing into Huddersfield Town Centre, improving the overall match day experience as well as other events experiences.
Councillor Turner.
Just add one thing. I mean, I have an age before I can remember when Huddersfield Uni was a polytechnic, and it used to put its own events on in those days. I've been to see the odd person there, shall we say. So there is that market there. And one of the things that the university, whilst it achieves actually brilliantly academically, one thing it always scores low on is the fact that the nighttime offer for the students is not great. The entertainment offer is not great. That's the feedback from the students. It always scores poor on that. So that's why they're really interested in this, because that, if they can get that percentage up, it helps with their footfall. It helps with attracting students, etc. The rest of it, academically, we know it achieves fantastic, but that entertainment, that stuff to get the kids out of campus into town centre is not there yet, but I'm sure the venue will, because as I said earlier, this is not just about doing one type of thing. There's a huge opportunity, we put thinking heads on here, of attracting different forms of musicians, not just simply what you might call traditional music. There's students across there from all sorts all parts of the world. So there's an opportunity to make Huddersfield a really cultural centre and put so many different types of music on, because there's an audience sat across the road. So it's a fantastic opportunity for us and the university, and we do talk to them on a regular basis about it.
Thank you, Councillor Chan. I do recall when the university had the Milton Hall for the Students' Union, and that was quite a well-used building and venue. Yeah. Thank you. So we're moving on to the housing revenue account. Councillor Crook.
Thanks very much, Chair. Firstly, I'm really pleased where we've been able to get to with the HRA budget this year, and I'll give a brief introduction to it and then hand over to David to go through some of the numbers. It's been a transformational and quite a challenging year for the HRA and for homes and neighbourhoods, in many respects, not least responding to the regulatory notice which has informed a lot of the work this year and which we received in March last year, and also the retirement of the Director of Housing in December, as well as several significant challenges being identified and responded to in year around regulatory compliance and also as a move towards service cost recovery. So presenting a balanced budget over the 5 and 30-year business plans, taking into account current and future pressures, and despite the broader and well-publicised pressure on social housing sector nationally, is a fantastic achievement, and I'd like to thank officers for all the work they've done on that. So yeah, this second slide. The HRA is funded almost exclusively through rents and service charges from our tenants, and from that income it needs to maintain the landlord and the housing management service, have a funded plan to improve not just safety, which is quite rightly our first priority, but also the customer experience, the quality of our housing stock from a comfort perspective in terms of adaptations, affordability of rent, affordability of running costs, which is heating costs critically, and the environmental performance of our stock in that respect. Worth noting here that the Kirklees Council 2038 environmental commitments do include our housing stock, so this will be a significant challenge going forwards. The HRA also has to ensure compliance with and respond to changes in legislation, and most significantly in recent years around fire safety following the Grenfell tragedy in 2017, and with respect to regulations around damp, mould and condensation issues following the sad death of Awa Bishak in 2020. The service has absolutely understood that need to main focus and on improvement, especially in the areas identified by the regulator of social housing, and to produce a budget that can manage in-year pressure, maintain a responsible reserve level, which we have done, and to fund and structure our essential capital investment programme of £382 million by 2032 to improve the quality of our housing stock. So I think that's probably enough introduction for me. I'll hand over to David to go through some of the numbers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cook. So in terms of the pressures that the housing revenue account will face in 2025-26, at the top there we have a planned recovery of service charges of income of £1.9 million, but clearly there's a number of processes that we are and need to go through in order to recover those service charges. The bulk of those are for grounds maintenance that we haven't been charging for previously, and I think most members are aware that that's the case. It's been largely publicised, and we are moving forward with that in an appropriate manner and notifying residents appropriately. But there is also within there £267,000 of sheltered heating charges that have not been charged in full in the past, and also district heating charges and cleaning charges, which I will come on to. But overall, there is a £1.9 million pressure that we need to recover from income from tenants, and ensuring that we do that in a managed way and not a way that that imposes all of the costs all within 1 year, because we're spreading this over a 2-year period, and we will recover further costs in the following year as well. In terms of damp, mould and condensation, I've already mentioned that there's a £2.5 million pressure, so I shan't go into that again. Disrepair, I've talked about the £1.5 million pressure, and housing property stock condition surveys. We are in right now we are in year 1 of 3 of our rolling stock competition survey, which will go through all of our 21,000 plus properties and ensure that we complete 40% in the first year, another 40% in the second year, and 20% the final year, so that we have an appropriate understanding of our stock and who's in our stock as well, and the needs that they have and the needs of the property. Really important for us in terms of ensuring that we direct works into the appropriate places, so that, as Councillor Crook says, we are compliant, but then we are able to deliver higher standards of wraparound services as well. The depreciation charge there is an exercise that is undertaken by every social landlord around the revenue costs of meeting the improvement to components within properties, so whether that's kitchens, bathrooms, heating systems and others. It's an accounting arrangement, but we need to ensure that there is sufficient money in the housing revenue account to pay for those improvements to properties, hence why that's set at £24 million within that particular year. If we can move on, I'll just move through only 2 slides this time, Chair, so it should be a bit quicker. Housing management and partnerships in the first instance. So the service charge review that I've mentioned for grounds maintenance is £725,000. I've also mentioned the communal cleaning of £20,000 to be recovered there, and personal heat and water charges that are raised charges in line with inflation of £573,000. Indeed, those charges have already been implemented. The meters have been put in people's properties so that we're able to meter at source, and they're able to be confident that they are paying for their bill and their bill only, and the appropriate level, and that will recover within the full year £573,000 that's not been recovered previously. In terms of our service charge review for communal and personal heating in retirement schemes, again there's £267,000 additional income that we will get through the service charge review there. We will ensure that we go through all of the due process with regards to these increases in service charges, including making sure that residents are aware of all the support that's available to them, particularly debt management support. We don't want people to be unnecessarily concerned around this. We will ensure that the letters that go to people are about their charges, not about global charges that may or may not happen within years to come. So we're being really quite careful about that, and that might mean that we implement some of them later within the year, because we're doing things appropriately, but we will move at the appropriate pace to ensure that we take the tenants with us in terms of introducing these appropriate charges within the coming year. In housing management, we know that we can make reduction in staffing levels. We have a lot of staff in housing management. This is not to say that we will reduce visibility of housing management officers. We just know that we can be more efficient in terms of some of the team structures within our housing management service. In terms of council tax charges on empty properties, we need to get better at turning around our void properties. They take too long, and it means that we not only do we not have properties available to let in the shortest time available, but we also incur additional costs, particularly when there's been long-term voids of council tax. So we have a programme in place to reduce the number of the length of time properties are vacant and in the voids process, which will have benefits in terms of the lower amounts of council tax paid. If we can move on to the next one, please. So at the top there, we are changing the way that we prepare properties for people, and more in line with what is custom and practice elsewhere, and I've always experienced elsewhere, which is decorating vouchers. You've had them in Kirklees in the past. We've tried the measures of decorating for people. Yes, it's great to have a fully decorated flat, but it's incredibly expensive, and it's not the norm in rented properties to go through that process. Decorating vouchers give people the opportunity to put their stamp on their property and have some assistance in order to do that, and it's a far far cheaper way of delivering that service and ensuring that a property is presented appropriately, and saves us £500,000 within a year. We are reviewing our concierge service, particularly at Home Park Court at Barry Brow, because those properties are being primed, as you know, for demolition later on this year. So we expect them to be completely empty by February. We've been able to step back the concierge facility because we've done all of the improvement works previously, because we still have people, although very few people living in the flats now. We still needed to make sure that the compartmentalisation, the fire doors and everything was put in place. And once they were, we were able to step back in terms of the concierge facility, which was the expensive part, saving us £250,000. Again, avoid rent loss. The other side of income loss is that you lose rental income when properties are void. So our conservative estimates of the improvements that we expect to make around void turnaround within a year are that we will recover another £255,000 in rent, because we've got properties that are occupied rather than sat vacant for longer. We are reviewing the staffing structure within asset management. This is one of the areas that's had, in homes and neighbourhoods, quite a lot of turnaround in the workforce. And it's probably at the heart of why we have a lot of or we've experienced a lot of issues in terms of stock quality, hence why we're working with the regulator of social housing. We are now moving to have a permanent staffing structure in place within asset management, and less reliance on the more expensive interim arrangements and consultancy arrangements. And again, that saves us £100,000 within a year. We are, because we're working with Kevin and his team around treasury management. You'll have seen on his slides around the capital programme. It's carefully managed, and we've been managing it so far with the reserves. We can't do that in future, but we need to make sure that with the borrowing that we do undertake for the capital programme moving forward is at the appropriate lowest cost, and we think there are savings that we can put in place around our interest costs in future by being more certain about the drawdowns of borrowing within a year. And finally, in terms of the property services overheads efficiency, this is the repairs and maintenance direct labour organisation. Dave Brooke knows that he can bring two of his teams together, and he can save on a team leader and an assistant team leader and still deliver the same services to tenants. So there is an efficiency that we can deliver there. If I move on to the next and I believe final slide for me, which is just to comment in terms of the borrowing for capital schemes in the next period, moving up to 2032. So we've talked about Bury Brow demolition, but that's not the end. We want to build new homes, new council homes on the site at Bury Brow. We know that that's going to cost us in the region of £35 million. We've factored that in to the housing revenue account. We will, though, work with Homes England to ensure that we recover any grant that's available for those properties and reduce the council's potential investment into them. But we want to deliver homes because we know that the 21,000 plus homes that we have got at the present time aren't enough. We are still losing homes through right to buy, obviously, in terms of the council stock. So we are very much confidently looking forward around replenishing the council stock, and that's one of the areas that we can do that in. We also are on with the refurbishment, which most members will know about with Buxton House. It's a costly refurbishment, but it was the tenant voice was very clear. Tenants wanted to stay in Buxton House, very well located, wanted social housing right in the heart of Huddersfield town centre. So that's the costs that have been put in the capital programme moving forward for that. And there are a number of sites, smaller sites that we've got around council house building, where we're building new homes. Sycamore Grange at Golker is one example of that, where we've decommissioned that resident living scheme, and we are building appropriate new housing on that site. And again, we've put provision within the capital programme, funded by all of this is funded by the HRA rental income that Councillor Crook talked about previously, along with borrowing that allows us to deliver it within the time frame. The capital plan is the biggest bulk of that, just shy of £160 million, all the capital works that Councillor Crook talked about in the first instance, and then finally ensuring that we have sufficient in our programme for building safety of £11.2 million. So, Chair, I will stop there.
Thank you, Devon. Thank you, Councillor Crook. Can I just ask a quick question? One of the last ones there was around Buxton House and the 15 million, and listening to the residents there about wanting to have that accommodation within the town centre. Were any other options considered? Is it value for money in providing that within the town centre? And what other options obviously were considered before sticking with that one?
So we did consider a range of options. They were all set out in the report that was brought to Cabinet at the time. So the options were considered around demolition and redevelopment of the site, as well as obviously the refurbishment option was on there. It was quite clear in terms of the tenant feedback that tenants wanted to stay there. We did look at the cost appraisal because it is clearly quite high cost per unit there. It's not what you would do from if you were working on a net present value with Homes England to determine what an investable site looked like and the metrics around that. That was made very clear to Cabinet at the time, and Cabinet made the decision that actually this was one of the areas that they wanted to invest and ensure that there was a continuation of not just affordable homes but council homes within Huddersfield Town Centre. So that's what we're on with delivering now.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments from committee? No? Excellent. Thank you both for your information presentation. I propose that we take a break now at this point, and then we'll continue with the corporate and then the council plans. So we'll move the timetable that we had around to have a break now, a shorter break, in order to proceed and get through all of the items that we have. So if we return... What time? 10? How long do people want? Open to suggestions. If not, I'll just tell you. 20 past. 20 past 1. Does people want longer? Yeah. Half past. We'll return at 1:30. One Thank you. Welcome back to those who have made it back. Still on item 7, and the next item is corporate. So can I invite Councillor Hawkins, portfolio holder, and Rachel, the Executive Director, to provide an overview of the key pressures and savings for this directorate, please.
Good afternoon, Chair. Can I just check my sound's working on your end, okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair, members. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all regarding the draft budget proposals on corporate services, and apologies for being virtually in attendance today. A slight caveat before I start is that the corporate resource element of the directorate does fall under the corporate portfolio, but parts of the public health elements don't. So I'll be introducing the top level priorities for the directorate as a whole, but if you have any public health related questions, those will need to be directed to others, if that's okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the draft budget proposals broadly cover a saving of £1 million across public health and corporate resource directorate. The biggest pressure that we're facing, and indeed the local government sector is facing, is the increase in demand on temporary accommodation. The LGA did a bit of an analysis a couple of years back on this, reporting an 89% increase in demand on temporary accommodation, costing councils across the country £1.75 billion. The massive shortfall in social housing has led to hotels and B&Bs being used as temporary accommodation, which has been covered extensively in the media, but I was very pleased just before Christmas to read of the Labour government's cash boost to local authorities to tackle and reduce and prevent the root cause of homelessness. So that's the main pressure, but where are the savings in the directorate? There are 3 main areas that we focused on, which I think a couple I've touched upon before in when I've been to OSMC. They are the improving the efficiencies across the administration and corporate resource, vacancy management across the directorate, and a review of our fees and charges, particularly of our traded services. The efficiencies and vacancy management, I feel, have been touched upon before and are reasonably self-explanatory within the draft budget proposals. But I would like to give a bit of context around the reviews of fees and charges in particular. We're seeing a prolonged period of relatively high inflation in this country, which has manifested as a increase in the cost of living, which I think we've all felt when we've been on our weekly shop. But the impact is magnified for larger organisations like councils, but also from a trade and services point of view, our customers, our suppliers, and also our private sector competitors. As such, it is only right that we review our fees and charges regularly to ensure that we're meeting those cost pressures while remaining competitive in the market, and make sure that the Kirklees taxpayers ultimately not losing out. I'll hand over to Rachel to outline the specific details of the savings proposals, but very happy to take any questions at the end.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. So, as Councillor Hawkins mentioned about housing benefit subsidy, so obviously that's an unusual thing sometimes to see in a corporate function, but because the welfare and exchequer function sits with me, then what we do is we pay the consequences of that in terms of when people are put in temporary accommodation and B&B. What I can say, though, is this pressure that we're adding into the budget next year builds on some of the transformation work that we've done to keep that number stable, and we've got lots of plans to help reduce that under Councillor Crook's supervision next year. So we're really looking forward to being able to bring that down further. We've also got a pressure of court fee income, so this is where we take people to court for not paying things. Now, we've maxed out all the court dates that are currently available, and the court doesn't put any new dates on. We had an income target which is historically sat in that budget for many, many years that we've never ever hit. So by putting this 400,000 into the base budget next year, it makes that income target realistic with the amount of people we have to take through court and with the amount of court dates we're able to get. I'll pass to Kevin to do central budgets because that's his bit really.
Thanks, Rachel. So just a couple of lines on the central budgets. So with regards to pay awards, we will budget for a 3% pay award for staff for 25-26. Members will be aware that the council doesn't set individual pay, which we're part of a national negotiating body, but 3% seems a reasonable amount given the latest inflation rates. And then on Treasury management, both David and myself have touched upon the capital plan. So the 21.8 initial pressure is the financing cost of the capital programme. So that's includes the MRP, the minimum revenue provision, the amount we have to set aside to repay debt. The council agreed a revised MRP policy towards the end of 23-24, and it's still code compliant, but that new policy means we don't have to apply as much to revenue as that 21.8 million. So therefore, we will take 10.8 million into reserves. The benefit of that, it does allow councils time to deal with urgent issues that arise in year, and also it can provide resource for transformation or delays in delivery of savings plans. This has all been through Corporate Governance and Audit Committee, so they're fully aware. But just to let members of this panel know that ultimately the council's capital financing costs in the medium term will go up, so we will have to fund those pressures either from the remaining reserves that are available or by funding through in-year pressures like we do on demand. So I think that's the two bits there really I wanted to get across. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just moving on to the savings then. So as Councillor Hawkins said, these are predominantly where we can in those areas that he articulated at the beginning. So the first one is we've got a review of numerous fees and charges across the culture and visitor economy services. So that's everything from school catering through to town hall income, room hire, etc. I know Councillor Lawson in the previous asked about the 3% fees and charge uplift that's in the budget more broadly. So where this is more than that, that's why it's in as a budget proposal. And that's because for some of those, for example, the cost of food, if we only put the fees and charges up by 3%, then we wouldn't cover the costs of providing it at all. So what we try and do, particularly with things like school meals, is make sure we're competitive in terms of looking at other providers and making sure we're doing it for the least we can, but making sure we are recovering the costs and not incurring a deficit from that. We annually increase bereavement fees and charges, and again that would be part of the routine 3% uplift, but consumables in bereavement again have gone significantly up in terms of fuel and other sorts of things that are involved in funeral services. So again, we're consulting on increasing that. We're trying to be more efficient with our IT service contracts. So, for example, if we've got a contract that comes to an end, we will try and renegotiate on better terms and potentially use volumes, particularly as we move into a better contract with better devices, hopefully. So that we hope to make about 100,000 with that. Across the functions that sit under strategy innovation, which are communications, transformation, IT, data, policy, that's all about trying to hold back as many posts as possible and making sure that we are releasing those vacancies to contribute to the council's bottom line. So again, that wouldn't be affecting anyone in the community or on the front line. In finance services, which is in Kevin's area, we are trying to reduce staffing levels there. We've got quite an ageing finance workforce, I would say. And so some of them will be looking to retire. So how do we move into a more effective structure that does what we need to do going forward? Governance, Sam obviously came into post at the beginning, spring last year, and she's looking at how we can do more with the governance teams that we've got and look at where other teams across the council might be councillor facing and whether there's any efficiencies or effectiveness we can do by bringing those teams together. And then finally, we're looking at people services and trying to be more effective. So, for example, we've recently brought in the learning and development functions from adults and children's, which were 2 separate services. So we're hoping to be able to make some management efficiencies by having that as one central function. Kevin, do you want to touch on Treasury?
Yeah, just the saving there on the savings in financing costs of the capital plan of 2 million. So we've done a lot of work in reprofiling the capital plan this year, and I think we were fairly close to hitting that target with the reprofiled plan as it was. As I mentioned earlier, we just need to be cognizant of the interest rates. I'm sure we will hit that target.
Okay, and finally, in terms of capital for me then, so we have about 7.8 million for IT, so this is about where we are purchasing or building systems that hopefully will make us more effective and efficient. So quite a lot of the transformation activity across the organisation relies on a digital solution, as well as looking at how we can be more effective, for example, with our telephony system. So we've recently done Mosaic in adults, and there's a plan to do a programme in homes and neighbourhoods, as well as hopefully in highways. So again, that's in there. Kevin has put together an investment and modernisation fund as part of the capital. So this is an opportunity for officers or obviously elected members to come forward with proposals around areas that we might be able to make a revenue saving. And that's 10 million each year over 5 years. And the expectation is that any proposal that comes in, the revenue saving must exceed any borrowing costs that we would pay on that money. We're additional 2 million capital into school catering, which again is for equipment and those kinds of things. And then for bereavement, again, we have a programme of repairs and upgrades for some of our cremators and other physical assets within those premises. So we keep that as a capital budget as and when it's needed. But as with all capital, it will all be accompanied by a clear business case that demonstrates what the benefits are. And I think, I have one more slide, sorry. I just wanted to remind members as I was going last of the next key dates in relation to the budget. So consultation, as the leader mentioned, finished on Wednesday, so we're busy analysing that as we speak. We've got the budget and council plan going to cabinet on the 11th, so papers will be published on the 3rd. Deadline for group amendments is the 24th at noon, and they will be published on the 26th, all en route for budget council on the 5th of March. So thank you, Chair. Any questions on any of that?
Thank you for your presentation, Councillor Hawkins. And Rachel, thank you. And Kevin, any comments or questions from committee members? Can I just ask one question on the court fees and the numbers? I was just wondering what numbers were assigned to that particular one when you mentioned the number of court dates that were possible or that you could get. Is it?
There's a monthly court date that's for this type of activity, so we make sure we book them all out. But there was a big backlog during COVID, which I think they're still struggling to deal with in some cases. But rest assured, we try and get as many dates as we can where possible.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? We're okay? Thank you. We'll move on. Thank you. I'll just go through, summarise some of the comments that have been provided and the feedback from committee. So we're noting and welcoming the improvements made in terms of the approach to pre-decision scrutiny in the last few years, and recommends that this should be undertaken at the earliest possible opportunity. We welcome the proposals to support and assist communities to undertake activities and minimise bureaucracy. Stresses the importance of ward budgets and the principle of resilience. Suggests that how the budget is presented be reviewed to provide additional detail for context and to help understanding the impacts, and that relates to the budget book we spoke about previously. and also welcome the improvements in children's services over the last 10 years, and thanks all those involved for their dedication and efforts to bring this about. And also welcome the important investment into early years and support and the efforts being made to reduce the number of out-of-area placements for children who are looked after. Okay. Cabinet members and officers be thanked for attending the meeting to present the budget proposals for 25-26, and the opportunity for pre-decision scrutiny be welcomed, and the comments made by the committee that I've just mentioned be considered in taking the budget forward and to be reported to Cabinet and Council at the meetings where the final decisions are taken. Are we all happy with those proposals? Could we just have a show of hands? Happy to approve that? Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 8, the Council Plan for 25-26. A presentation will be given in respect of the Council Plan for 25-26. Any feedback from committee will be taken into account prior to the final plan being submitted to Cabinet and Council for approval.
I'm just going to say a few words first, if that's okay, Chair. Thank you. Not to say very much, but just to say that I think I came here back in September, was it? Something like that. Just to talk about the priorities of the new Labour Cabinet, the Labour Group. And I said it was a sort of work in progress then. Now we have completed, the Labour Group and the Labour Cabinet has considered what our priorities should be going forward in the medium, well, in the short term at least. And they're what... They're here, and they're what we have based the budget deliberations on, as you've already heard. But I did just want to say, I mean, this was just a revision of the council plan, and we are now looking, going forwards, to have a more in-depth review of the whole council plan from next year. And this year now. It could well change slightly or even substantially, I mean, in terms of the rest of the document, because the rest of the council plan is, I mean, our vision, our shared outcomes, those haven't changed for quite a long time. And they may stay the same, but we do need to think about it again. So that's all I really wanted to say, going by way of introduction, and Stephen will take you through the rest of it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, as has been said in the previous item, the council plan and the budget go alongside each other. So the council plan sets out the priorities and the areas of focus for the council. The budget outlines the resourcing alongside that. So they have been developed alongside each other, and the budget consultation is also something that we've considered and are considering as part of the development of this. So the development of the plan is aligned with the financial year, of course, as well, and it will go to full council for decision alongside the budget in March. As the leader was just saying, the council plan retains this year some of those longer term elements that we've seen in previous versions of the plan. So that's things like our vision for Kirklees, our shared outcomes, and our key partnership strategies. Those are really things which can't be delivered within one financial year, and so we've been committed to those for a long time. I'll go through the detail of some of those now. So our vision, which is on the screen, is for Kirklees to be a district that combines a strong, sustainable economy with a great quality of life, leading to thriving communities, growing businesses, high prosperity, and low inequality, where people enjoy better health throughout their lives. I think another feature of the vision is we can't deliver it alone as a council. So working in partnership alongside health partners, education partners, the police, the private sector is really important in that. And as the leader said, we've had that for a long time now. Likewise, our shared outcomes, we've had those for a long time as well. They set out more details of the kind of impacts that we want to have through our programmes. So the 8 shared outcomes set out on there, again, can't be delivered alone by the council. Those are things that we aim to deliver in partnership. And those were, at the time, discussed and have been agreed with partners. There is another outcome on the side there, which is more for the council, and that's about being efficient and effective. So in order to play our role in delivering those outcomes and the vision, we want to make sure that we're working as efficiently and effectively as possible. The new council plan retains all of those outcomes. Likewise, we're also reiterating our commitment to the key partnership strategies, which you'll be aware of on the panel. The health and wellbeing strategy, which is discussed at the Health and Wellbeing Board, the Inclusive Communities Framework, which has been discussed and adopted at the Communities Board, and the Council supports that. The Environment Strategy, which was recently approved at Cabinet, and the Inclusive Economy Strategy is in development, and we hope to be able to bring that for decision soon. So in terms of some of the more internal elements, there is something about the way we work as an organisation. It ties to that efficient and effective outcome. Our people strategy really sets out our values and our behaviours and the priorities we have for staff and the way we want to work. That's obviously at the heart of delivering our priorities. We can't deliver any of them without a workforce that is appropriately skilled and is working in the right way. So our council plan kind of talks a bit about the people strategy and the role of staff in that. We're also recommitting to the principles of people, partners, place, which again we've had for some years. So working with people and not doing to or for them is important to work in partnership with people and maintain their independence where possible across a number of council services. Working with partners, I've said a few times, many of our ambitions we cannot deliver alone as a council, so that continues to be a really important thing. And that can be at a national level, regional level, across the district, or at a hyper-local level, working with community organisations and other place-based teams. And on place-based, I think we recognise in Kirklees that one size doesn't fit all. Every place is very, very different. And our commitment to place-based working is a commitment to recognise that and embed that in everything we do. So those are more internal principles about the way we work. I'll come on to the priorities, which the leaders already pointed to at the beginning of this morning's session. And I'll just outline some of the what that priority means and some of the areas of focus that we're looking at as part of developing the plan. So getting the basics right, balanced budget and a modern organisation. That involves some of what you'd expect it to involve. There's an internal element of that for the council about how do we do things well, how do we get those basic things right, and then there's a basic services element to that as well in terms of the kind of external perspective on that. It does include things around the budget, which we've obviously discussed at length today, and also some of our high demand services. So refuse collection and highways are areas that we're looking at as part of that priority. The Chief Executive mentioned earlier about customer expectations and potentially that gap between what residents expect we should be doing and what we're able to do with the powers and the funding available to us. We're doing a lot of work on that at the moment, and that falls within getting the basics right for us. External funding is something that we discussed at this committee before Christmas. That continues to be a big priority. Obviously, with budget pressures on our budget, it becomes even more important for us to look outside at national funders, West Yorkshire Combined Authority and so on, and see how we can draw that funding in to support our priorities. So just on protecting the vulnerable and achieving inclusion, it does really, I think as the leader said earlier, underpin everything we're doing, and all of these priorities really are cross-cutting. But it includes being an organisation with a culture of inclusion and diversity, and we have an inclusion and diversity strategy recently approved. We've begun delivery of many of the elements of that. We've already completed some of the key actions from that. Targeting services to the most vulnerable and making sure no one gets left behind, as the leader said, it's really at the heart of the work of local authorities. And resilience, which obviously we discussed at some length earlier. Building resilient and cohesive communities is a really important part of protecting the vulnerable and achieving inclusion. So in terms of the areas of focus, just to pick out a few, this includes our kind of children's social care services, our adults care services, as you'd expect as well as the inclusion and diversity work and the people strategy work on being an inclusive organisation. Preventing homelessness and rough sleeping is also a real priority, and that falls within this priority. So, thriving people in communities now and over the longer term. This includes working with community organisations, really recognising the role that they play in communities to create thriving, clean and safe communities. I think third sector capacity is absolutely fundamental to all of our priorities, and that early intervention and prevention as well. Dealing with problems before they become big problems, that is going to save us money in the longer term, but it's also going to make people's lives better as well. That does include schools and education, which obviously came through in the budget consultation as one of the areas that the public are most interested in. So in terms of the areas of focus within that priority, we're looking at things that you'd expect really, partnership working within communities, working with community groups, working strategically with the school and education sector, making the most of our library network and helping people to be physically active as well, which from a public health perspective is really important in terms of that early intervention and prevention aspect. We'll be doing lots of work, working strategically to develop the community sector as well. Obviously the funding pressures in the community sector, community organisations are struggling with energy bills and funding drying up from national funders. So we'll be working closely with third sector partners on that. Finally, on local economic growth, working with regional and national partners, so that's the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, national government, other national funders. We've been doing a lot of work to build our connections with the National Lottery Community Fund, for example, Sports England and other key funders. We'll be continuing to do lots of that. Some of this is about making the most of innovation and technology. What opportunities are there to promote growth in the region with businesses and creating jobs. Artificial intelligence has obviously caught the headlines a lot recently, and there are lots of opportunities there. But it's also about some of the kind of basic infrastructure as well, so housing, transport, and our green spaces, as you'd expect. So we're developing a transport strategy, and we'll start to consult with people on that. We'll be looking at strengthening rail links and transport hubs, including buses across the district, progressing key housing sites, many of which you've heard about before because these are long-term commitments. Town centre regeneration, which we have happening across the district, making the most of the West Yorkshire Investment Zone, which obviously in Huddersfield is becoming increasingly visible with the role of Huddersfield University, and maximising the benefits from devolution and working regionally. So the national government is doing lots of work on how regional elements, how the West Yorkshire elements and other combined authorities will work. We obviously want to make sure that they work for Kirklees. So that's a bit more of the detail on some of the priorities. And I don't know if the leader has anything to add. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for the presentation, and Councillor Patterson. Are there any comments or questions from committee? Councillor Cooper.
So it's an issue I brought up in the past, actually, which is about one-year plans. And we have another one-year plan. If you look at Bradford Council, their current corporate plan is 21-25. Leeds City Council's corporate plan 20-25. Wakefield City Council 24-26, 2 years. And similarly, Calderdale Council 24-26, 2 years. Most councils do not have a one-year plan. Most councils actually have multi-year plans to guide their activities and the way they go about. I appreciate that what you've said is that some of these things go over a number of years, but actually, should we be reconsidering how we approach this? I know this has been said in the past, and I think it wasn't just me who was driving the point home. I think others were as well last time this came. And I do wonder whether now's the time, particularly with multi-year settlements coming ahead. I'm trying to find some way of sort of getting a handle on that. I think it'd be a good thing. Other thoughts, I know a council not a million miles away from here, they've got 3 Ps as their theme. And their 3 Ps are people, prosperity and planet as this particular council. And I mean, obviously there are things in there about a greener economy, and that's positive, and you would expect those things to be in there. It's just it being higher up the agenda, really, as being one of the themes, is those issues which mean that it's coming, if you like, right at the top. It's not part of what the council does. It's one of the themes that the council has, and I think the council will benefit from that and give a bit more focus to issues like climate change, and linking that to activity in communities and the economic benefits of addressing climate change and the threats that we have from that. External funding, good to bring in external funding. I just think there's obviously, but there's something else here which is about partners can access external funding that we necessarily can't, but they may not have the resources or the skills to be able to access that funding. But by them having that funding, they're able to achieve some of the objectives that the council has got on our behalf. And so it'd be really good to sort of see a dual approach to external funding, which is not just about the council, but an enabling activity with our partners. That's it.
I'll just come back, excuse me, briefly on the long-term corporate plan or council plan. Yes, they normally, I would actually see this as that it has been a long-term plan, which has been revised every year, which I think is, especially over the last few years, has been definitely needed. Because things do change, don't they? I mean, you have to review things. But certainly when I talked about a new plan coming forward, perhaps later this year, we've got quite a few things which will reset the council and its objectives. We've had the peer review, which there'll be things hopefully there that we can learn from. There will be the new funding review from the government. There'll be all sorts of things. So we can, I think, reset, and we should be taking a longer term. I mean, especially if we are going to have 3-year budgets from the government. I mean, that will make things easier to plan as well in terms of the longer term. So don't disagree with you. We certainly don't have to do though what everybody else has done. Let's be unique. We are Kirklees. We'll do our own thing. And just some of the things. Yeah, it was really hard to put all our... I mean, when we talked about this as a group, there were all sorts of things that everyone wanted as a top priority. It's really difficult, isn't it? And certainly greener Kirklees is their very a little pithy term, perhaps, but that we are talking there about climate change, etc., etc. We've tried to encompass in this everything, or as much as we can. Everything here is a priority. Everything can't be a top priority, of course. Something has to come first. But we've tried to make sure that we do have put in everything that we are either passionate about or care about or is important, not just to the council, but to the residents of Kirklees. So that's my comment on your questions. I'll let Stephen say a bit more, perhaps.
Great, thank you. Yeah, just on the long-term stuff, obviously when we come to assessing that, we'll have to look at all the contextual stuff, so the multi-year settlements and changes in devolution and so on. So we'll definitely look at that, and we'll look at the plans that you've referenced. Obviously finding stuff that works for Kirklees is really important, but what can we learn from other places? On the environment stuff, I guess the thing to emphasise is the council plan is never an attempt to summarise everything that we do, and we do an awful lot, as you know, we do an awful lot of environmental stuff, and the environment strategy really sets out the scale of our ambition on that. So the reference in the council plan to the environment strategy is a reinforcement of the importance of the commitments in that strategy, and the partnership element of that is really important. On partners, definitely completely agree with helping them access funding. So I think we've done some of that with our regeneration programme, so working with Huddersfield University on the West Yorkshire Investment Zone, for example, helping to bring in support from a regional level. That's going to become even more important as the combined authorities get increasing powers and influence, as the devolution white paper is suggesting. So we'll continue to do that. We'll be deepening that. We do some work corporately, passing external funding opportunities onto third sector groups. So together with the external funding officer who was here before Christmas and the third sector team, there's a lot of distribution to community groups of funding opportunities from national funders or regional funders. We don't write bids for those groups because we don't have the capacity for that, to be honest. But helping third sector organisations access that funding is really important. And we did some work over the summer with our community anchor organisations to try to help them access some funding from the National Lottery. That, I have to say, that didn't go where we wanted it to, just because National Lottery changed some of their funding arrangements. They're currently reviewing some of that, and it won't be confirmed until April. But we'll be coming back to that definitely. So we'll definitely want to support partners to access funding opportunities.
Yeah, there is some really good work going on. I mean, one example is Space Hive, which is a crowdfunding platform. Which the positive things about it are that the council will match fund up to about £5,000 for community projects, and so declare an interest if I have to that I've done 2 bids on that score, and so that's really positive, and we've been able to lever in resources. The sort of the negative, I guess, is that the fees are really quite high, and it's only the council funding that makes you use that instead of crowdfunder or some normal platform. And there's a lot of work that has to go into get all the evidence and everything to go on the Growing Great Spaces fund. But I think there's definitely some positives there, and it's small scale. It's little bits of money, but it has really big leverage and impact. So there's some good stuff there to just to give some positives back, I think.
Yeah, just to comment on that, I think small amounts of money into community organisations, we know that has a kind of disproportionate impact. So the third sector team is working quite closely with a lot of community organisations, and we work very closely with third sector leaders through our community infrastructure contracts to help to make some of that happen in local places as well. So yeah, I think we're always trying to do better and more on that.
Can I just follow on from that? I think I've mentioned it before when I think we've noticed in this last year a lot of events that haven't taken place around Christmas events, summer events, where local community groups come together, volunteers in communities come together, and would have often relied on probably ward budgets to help them put in place what they need. And as Councillor Cooper mentioned, the difficulty can then be when they're maybe sent an email and say, have you tried these particular sources? The resources aren't there, the time, the commitment in order to do that probably isn't there. But when you've got the ward councillors in a particular area who know their area, know what works, what benefits the communities, what brings communities together, is of importance. We used to have was it New Homes bonus? One time we had a little panel for that, a little committee that used to put forward things. We've got the Community Plus Fund, which I receive anonymous emails from, I don't know who it comes from, it's just Community Plus Fund team, who highlight applications that have come in and been approved. And I know community groups who've not been able to access, for example, ward funding, who've then tried through that Community Plus Fund and been unsuccessful. So it disproportionately impacts on some communities that lose out totally on things that they've historically done. It brings people together, ticks a lot of boxes and meets a lot of the potential outcomes of the council plan and what we're trying to achieve. And I'm just wondering, with the likes of the Community Plus Fund, is there any duplication, or is there any other access or way in, and the New Homes bonus that we used to have, of how elected members in their wards, since having a reduced ward budget, can access that kind of funding for specific events that used to take place for a long number of years that unfortunately don't take place anymore?
So we're doing a piece of work over the next few months about looking at the different teams across the council that support community organisations and the different funding pots that are available, and whether there are ways of working with those in a better way. So I'll feed that into that piece of work if that's okay, and feed your question in and see what we can come up with on that. Engaging with councillors, absolutely. I think the kind of knowledge that councillors bring of their local places is invaluable. So we absolutely want to do that. Again, the comment on ward budgets in particular, I think it probably feeds into the piece of work that we're describing, but also I know Steve made a comment earlier about off the back of another question about ward budgets. So I'll pass that comment on to Steve so he can consider those two together, if that's okay. I think it's also just a point maybe to a national problem that we know from national research that there are reducing numbers of volunteers. There's also reducing amounts of funding available to groups across the country. And that is because of the funding pressures facing public authorities. But it's also because volunteers are ageing, and increasingly the number of volunteers is reducing. When you put that together with the amount of time it takes to write an application, as you say, it does become more difficult for community organisations. So I think we're definitely aware of that. We need to come up with something that can help with that. Obviously within the resources we've got available. I'll take that away and see if we can do more and better. I know we're always interested in doing more and better in that area. So.
No, thank you. Appreciate that. I think it's useful when we have got active, willing volunteers that we don't lose them by saying, unfortunately, we haven't got the money this year, and that where there is a real opportunity. So it would just be a shame to lose that and to have more of an input. For example, that Community Plus Fund if that could be used in such a way as the new homes bonus money was, where there was a committee, it was decided, everything was considered and looked at the best value and best for particular areas, so that certain areas weren't left out. And as I say, and I get volunteers as an issue, but where we have them, it'd be nice to keep that going. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? No? Thank you. So, can I move that Cabinet members and officers be thanked for attending the meeting to present the budget proposals for 25-26 and the opportunity for pre-decision scrutiny be welcomed. The comments made by the committee be considered in taking the...
Sorry, this is about the council plan, that's my typo.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. Well, I'm still thanking everybody for
yeah,
their attendance and for their contributions.
So taking the council plan forward.
And for the council plan, for the budget being brought forward to Cabinet and Council at the meetings where the final decisions are taken. Are we all happy with that? Thank you. And thank you for your attendance contributions. Really appreciate it. Say this is new. We'll probably tweak it, do it slightly differently, looking at timings and everything else, but appreciate everybody's contribution, attendance and input. So thank you very much.
She's got the work
Yeah. Yeah. We're moving on. I know some people will be going. We're just moving on to item 9 for the committee. It's the work programme for 24-25. If there are any comments or anything for noting on the work programme. The work programme will be on the back of your agenda pack if there are any comments or questions.
Members can always feed them today after the meeting.
If you do see anything on the work programme after the meeting that you wish to share, then you can do that by emailing. Yeah? Councillor Cooper.
I guess at some point there'll be a good moment to look over government policy and legislation and look at that impact again. We've got that. That was on the 20th of September, but I think it's probably something I think we said we were going to have a watching brief on it, didn't we? And I just wonder whether there's going to be another point that we say, right, let's take stock again of the impact of government policy. So, I mean, the obvious things are budgets and budget settlements, but I think also, it's the nature of the relationship between the change of relationship between national and local government, and I think that would warrant a bit more examination.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll have. I think it's a briefing note for the February meeting, but we can consider any meetings we have before then to feed that back. Yeah. So the next meeting is the 20th of February. Everything be okay with that? Yeah. So thank you all for your attendance, and see you at the next meeting in February.